Chapter 21. Faith had never thought of herself as a morning person, but she had gotten into the habit of going into work early when Jeremy was a child. You couldn't not be a morning person when there was a hungry boy to feed, dress, scrutinize, and send off to the bus stop by 7:13 at the latest. If not for Jeremy, she might have been one of those late-night people, the sort who rolls into bed well after midnight. But Faith's usual bedtime ran closer to 10. Even after Jeremy was a teenager, and his waking hours were few and far between. For his own reasons, Will was always at work early too. Faith saw his Porsche parked in its usual space as she pulled the Mini into the lot under City Hall East. She put the car in park, then sat there trying to get the driver's seat back where she could reach the pedals and the steering wheel at the same time without being impaled by one while having to stretch to reach the other. After several minutes, she finally found the right combination and briefly thought about having the seat bolted into place. If Will wanted to drive her car again, he'd have to do it with his knees around his ears. There was a tap at her window, and Faith looked up, startled. Sam Lawson stood there, a cup of coffee in his hand. Faith opened the car door and wedged herself out, feeling like she'd put on 20 pounds overnight. Finding something to wear this morning had been a nearly impossible task. She was carrying enough water weight to fill a tank at SeaWorld. Thankfully, her giddiness over Sam Lawson had been a 24-hour virus. She did not relish having a conversation with him now, especially since her mind needed to be focused on the day ahead of her. "Hey, babe," Sam said, looking her up and down in his usual predatory way. Faith got her purse out of the back seat. "Long time no see." He gave a half shrug that implied he was merely the victim of circumstance. "Here," he said, offering her the coffee. "Decaf." Faith had tried to drink some coffee this morning. The smell had sent her rushing to the bathroom. "Sorry," she ignored the cup, walking away from him, trying not to get sick again. Sam tossed the cup into the trash can as he caught up with her. "Morning sickness?" Faith glanced around, afraid they'd be heard. "I haven't told anyone but my boss." She tried to remember when you were supposed to tell people. There had to be a certain number of weeks before you were sure it took. Faith must be coming up on that mark. She should start telling people soon. Should she get them all together? Invite her mother and Jeremy to dinner? Get her brother on speakerphone? Or was there a way to send a bulk anonymous email and perhaps jump on a flight to the Caribbean for a few weeks to avoid the fallout? Sam's fingers snapped in front of her face. "You in there?" "Barely." Faith reached for the door to the building just as he did. She let him open it for her. "I've got a lot on my mind." "About last night?" "It was 2 nights ago, actually." He grinned. "Yeah, but I wasn't really thinking about it until last night." Faith sighed as she pressed the elevator button. "Come here." He pulled her toward the alcove on the other side of the elevator. There was a vending machine with 3 rows of sticky buns, which Faith knew without having to look. Sam stroked her hair behind her ear. Faith pulled back. She wasn't ready for intimacy this early in the morning. She wasn't sure she was ever ready for it. Without thinking, she glanced up to make sure there wasn't a security camera watching them. He said, "I was an ass the other night. I'm sorry." She heard the elevator doors open, then close. "It's all right." "No, it's not." He leaned in to kiss her, but she pulled back again. "Sam, I'm at work." She didn't add the rest of what she was thinking, which was that she was in the middle of a case where 1 woman had died, another woman had been tortured, and 2 more were missing. This isn't the time. "It's never the time," he said, something he'd often told her years ago when they were seeing each other. "I want to try this again with you." "What about Gretchen?" He shrugged. "Hedging my bets." Faith groaned, pushing him away. She went back to the elevator and pressed the button. Sam didn't leave, so she told him, "I'm pregnant." "I remember." "I don't want to break your heart, but the baby's not yours." "Doesn't matter." She turned to face him. "Are you trying to work out some ghosts because your wife had an abortion?" "I'm trying to get back into your life, Faith. I know it has to be on your terms." Faith balked at the backhanded compliment. I seem to recall one of the problems between us, other than you being a drunk, me being a cop, and my mother thinking you were the Antichrist, was you didn't like the fact that I had a son. I was jealous of the attention you gave him. At the time, she had accused him of this very thing. To hear him admit to it now left her nearly breathless. "I've grown up," he said. The elevator opened. Faith made sure the car was empty, then held the door open with her hand. "I can't have this conversation now. I've got work to do." She got into the elevator and let the doors go. "Jake Berman lives in Coweta County." Faith nearly lost her hand stopping the doors. "What?" He took his notebook out of his pocket and wrote as he talked. "I tracked him down through his church. He's a deacon and a Sunday school teacher. They've got a great website with his picture on it. Lambs and Rainbows, Evangelical." Faith's brain couldn't process the information. "Why did you find him?" "I wanted to see if I could beat you to the punch." Faith didn't like where this was going. She tried to neutralize the situation. "Listen, Sam, we don't know that he's a bad guy." "I guess you've never been in the men's room at the Mall of Georgia." "Sam." "I haven't talked to him," he interrupted. "I just wanted to see if I could track him down when no one else could. I'm tired of Rockdale squeezing my balls. I much prefer it when you do." Faith let that comment go, too. "Give me the morning to talk to him." "I told you I'm not looking for a story." He grinned, showing all his teeth. "It was an exercise in faith." She narrowed her eyes at him. "I wanted to see if I could do your job." He tore off the piece of paper, giving her a wink. "Pretty easy stuff." Faith grabbed the address before he changed his mind. He held her gaze as the doors closed. Then Faith found herself staring at her reflection on the backs of the doors. She was sweating already, though she supposed in a pinch that could pass for a pregnant glow. Her hair was starting to frizz because, even though it was only April, the temperature was inching up the thermometer. She looked at the address Sam had given her. There was a heart around the entire thing, which she found annoying and endearing in equal parts. She didn't quite trust that he wasn't looking for a story in Jake Berman. Maybe the Atlanta Beacon was doing a down-low exclusive, outing married churchgoers who were trolling glory holes and finding raped and tortured women in the middle of the road. Could Berman be Pauline's brother? Now that she had an address, Faith wasn't so sure. What were the odds that Jake Berman had hooked up with Rick Sigler and both men just happened to be on the road at the same time the Coldfields car hit Anna Lindsay? The doors opened and Faith walked out onto her floor. None of the hall lights were on, and she flipped the switches as she walked toward Will's office. No light seeped from under his door, but she knocked anyway, knowing from his car that he was in the building. "Yes?" She opened the door. He was sitting at his desk with his hands clasped in front of his stomach. The lights were off. She asked, "Everything okay?" He didn't answer her question. "What's up?" Faith shut the door and opened the folding chair. She saw the back of Will's hand and that some new scratches had been added to the cuts he'd received while beating Simkov's face. She didn't mention this, instead going to the case. "I got Jake Berman's address. He's in Coweta. That's about 45 minutes from here, right?" "If the traffic's good." He held out his hand for the address. She read it off to him. 1935 Leicester Street. He still had his hand out. For some reason, all Faith could do was stare at his fingers. Will snapped. "I'm not a fucking idiot, Faith. I can read an address." His tone was sharp enough to make the hair on the back of her neck rise. Will seldom cursed, and she had never heard him say fuck before. She asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just need the address. I can't do the interview with Simkov. I'll go find Berman and we'll meet back here after your appointment." He shook his hand. "Now give me the address." She crossed her arms. She would die before she gave him the piece of paper. "I don't know what the hell is wrong with you, but you need to get your head out of your ass and talk to me about this before we've got a real problem." "Faith, I've only got 2 testicles. If you want one, you're going to have to talk to Amanda or Angie." Angie. With that one word, all the fight seemed to go out of him. Faith sat back in the chair, her arms still crossed. studying him. Will looked out the window, and she could see the faint line of the scar going down the side of his face. She wanted to know how it had happened, how his skin had been gouged from his jaw, but, as with everything else, the scar was just another thing they did not talk about. Faith put the paper on his desk and slid the address across to him. Will gave it a cursory glance. There's a heart around it. Sam drew it. Will folded the paper and put it in his vest pocket. Are you seeing him? Faith was loath to use the words booty call, so she just shrugged. It's complicated. He nodded, the same nod they always used when there was something personal that wasn't going to be discussed. She was sick of this. What was going to happen in a month when she started showing more? What was going to happen in a year when she collapsed on the job because she had miscalculated her insulin? She could easily see Will making excuses for her weight gain, or simply helping her up and telling her she should be careful where she stepped. He was so damn good at pretending the house wasn't on fire even as he ran around looking for water to put it out. She threw up her hands in surrender. I'm pregnant. His eyebrows shot up. Victor's the father. I'm also diabetic. That's why I passed out in the garage. He seemed too shocked to speak. I should have told you before. That's what my secret appointment is in Snellville. I'm going to the doctor so she can help me with this diabetes thing. Sarah can't be your doctor? She referred me to a specialist. A specialist means it's serious. It's a challenge. The diabetes makes it more difficult. It's manageable, though. She had to add, at least, that's what Sarah said. Do you need me to go to your appointment with you? Faith had a glimpse of Will sitting in the waiting room of Delia Wallace's office with her purse in his lap. No, thank you. I need to do this on my own. Does Victor? Victor doesn't know. No one knows except you and Amanda, and I only told her because she caught me shooting up with insulin. You have to give yourself shots? Yeah. She could almost see his mind working, the questions he wanted to ask her but didn't know how to frame. Faith said, If you want another partner, why would I want another partner? Because it's a problem, Will. I don't know how much of a problem, but my blood sugar drops or goes up and I get emotional and I either bite your head off or feel like I'm going to burst into tears, and I don't know how I'm going to do my job with this thing. You'll work it out, he said, always reasonable. I worked it out. My problem, I mean. He was so adaptive. Anything bad that happened, no matter how horrible, he just nodded and moved on. She supposed that was something he'd learned at the orphanage. Or maybe Angie Pulaski had drilled it into him. As a survival skill, it was commendable. As the basis of a relationship, it was irritating as hell. And there was absolutely nothing Faith could do about it. Will sat up in his chair. He did his usual trick, making a joke to ease the tension. If I get a vote, I would rather you bite my head off than start crying. Back at you. I need to apologize. Suddenly he was serious again. For what I did to Simkov. I've never laid hands on anyone like that before. Not ever. He looked her directly in the eye. I promise it won't happen again. All Faith could say was, Thank you. Of course she didn't agree with what Will had done, but it was hard to shout out recriminations when he was so obviously already doing a good job of hating himself. It was Faith's turn to lighten things up. Let's stay away from good cop, bad cop for a while. Yeah, stupid cop, bitchy cop works a lot better for us. He reached into his vest pocket and handed her back Jake Berman's details. We should call Kawita and have them put eyes on Berman to make sure he's the right guy. The wheels in Faith's brain took their time moving in a new direction. She looked at Sam's block handwriting, the stupid heart around the address. I don't know why Sam thinks he can track down the guy in 5 minutes when our entire data processing division can't find him in 2 days. Faith took out her cell phone. She didn't want to bother with the proper channels, so she called Caroline, Amanda's assistant. The woman practically lived in the building, and she picked up the phone on the first ring. Faith relayed Berman's address and asked her to have the Coweta County field agent verify that this was the Jake Berman they had been looking for. Do you want him to bring the guy in? Caroline asked. Faith thought about it, then decided she didn't want to make the decision on her own. She asked Will, "Do you want them to bring in Berman?" He shrugged, but answered, "Do we want to tip him off?" "A cop knocking on his door is a tip-off no matter what." Will shrugged again. "Tell him to try to verify Berman's identity from a distance. If it's the right guy, then we'll go down there and snatch him up. Give the agent my cell number. We'll go after you finish talking to Simkov." Faith passed this on to Caroline. She ended the call, and Will turned his computer monitor toward her, saying, "I got this email from Amanda." Faith slid over the mouse and keyboard. She changed the color setting so her retinas didn't spontaneously combust, then double-clicked on the file. She summarized for Will as she read. "Tech hasn't been able to break into any of the computers. They say the anorexia chat room is impossible to open without a password. It's got some kind of fancy encryption. The warrants for Olivia Tanner's bank should be in this afternoon, so we can get into her phone and files." She scrolled down. She read silently, then told Will, "Okay, well, this might be something to take to the doorman. The fire exit door on the penthouse floor had a partial on the handle. Right thumb." Will knew Faith had spent most of yesterday afternoon combing through Anna Lindsay's building. "How are the stairs accessed?" "Either the lobby or the roof," she said, reading the next passage. "The fire escape ladder that runs down the back of the building had another print that matched the one from the door. They're sending it to the Michigan State Police to run comparables. If Pauline's brother has a record, it should come up. If we can get a name, then we're halfway there. We should check for parking tickets in the area. You can't just park anywhere in Buckhead. They're pretty good about catching you." "Good idea," Faith said, opening up her email account to send out the request. "I'll open it up to parking tickets in or around the area of all the last known locations of our victims." "Son of Sam was caught by a parking ticket." Faith tapped the keys. "You've got to stop watching so much television." "Not much else to do at night." She glanced at his hands, the new scratches. He asked, "How did he get Anna Lindsay out of the building?" "He couldn't have thrown her over his shoulder and taken her down the fire escape ladder." Faith sent off the email before answering. The exit door for the stairs was wired. An alarm would have gone off if anyone had opened the door. She asked, "Did he take her down the elevator and into the lobby?" "That's something to ask Simkov." "The doorman isn't there 24 hours, Faith reminded him. "The killer could have waited for Simkov to clock out, then used the elevator to bring her body down. Simkov was supposed to keep an eye on things after hours, but he was hardly dedicated to his job. There wasn't another doorman to relieve him. They've been trying to find someone to fill the position for 6 months, she told him. Apparently, it's hard to find someone who wants to sit on their ass behind a desk for 8 hours a day, which is why they put up with so much bullshit from Simkov. He was willing to double up his shifts, such as they were." "What about security tapes?" "They tape over them every 48 hours, she had to add, except for the ones from yesterday, which seemed to be missing. Amanda had made sure the tape of Will slamming Simkov's face into the counter had been destroyed. Will's face flooded with guilt, but still he asked, "Anything in Simkov's apartment?" "We tossed it upside down. He drives an old Monte Carlo that leaks like a sieve, and there aren't any receipts for storage units." "There's no way he could be Pauline's brother." "We've been so focused on that we haven't seen anything else." "All right, so let's take the brother out of the equation. What about Simkov?" "He's not smart. I mean, he's not stupid, but our killer is choosing women he wants to conquer. I'm not saying our bad guy is a genius, but he's a hunter. Simkov is a pathetic schmuck who keeps porn under his mattress and takes blowjobs to let whores into empty apartments." "You've never believed in profiles before." "You're right, but we're spinning our wheels everywhere else." "Let's talk about our guy," Faith said, something Will usually suggested. "Who's our killer?" "Smart," Will admitted. "He probably works for an overbearing woman or has overbearing women in his life." "That's pretty much every man on the planet these days." "Tell me about it." Faith smiled, taking his words as a joke. "What kind of job does he have?" "Something that lets him exist under the radar. He has flexible hours. Watching these women, learning about their habits, takes a lot of time. He's got to have a job that lets him come and go as he pleases." "Let's ask the same boring, stupid question one more time. What about the women? What do they have in common?" "The anorexia bulimia thing." "The chat room." She shot that one down on her own. "Of course, even the FBI can't find out who the site is registered to. No one has been able to break Pauline's password. How could our guy find it? Maybe he started the site himself in order to troll for victims. How would he find out their true identities? Everyone's tall, thin, and blonde on the internet, and usually 12 and horny. He was twisting his wedding ring again, staring out the window. Faith couldn't stop looking at the scratches on the back of his hand. In forensic parlance, they would have called the marks defensive wounds. Will had been behind someone who had gouged her fingernails deep into his skin. She asked, "How did it go with Sarah last night?" Will shrugged. "I just picked up Betty. I think she likes Sarah's dogs. She's got 2 greyhounds." "I saw them yesterday morning." "Oh, that's right." "Sarah's nice," Faith told him. "I really like her." Will nodded. "You should ask her out." He laughed, shaking his head at the same time. "I don't think so." "Because of Angie?" He stopped twisting the ring. "Women like Sarah Linton." She saw a flash of something in his eyes that she couldn't quite read. Faith expected him to shrug it off, but he kept talking. "Faith, there's no part of me that's not damaged." His voice sounded thick in his throat. "I don't mean just the things you can see. There's other stuff. Bad stuff." He shook his head again, a tight gesture, more for his own benefit than Faith's. He finally told her, "Angie knows who I am. Somebody like Sarah." Again, his voice trailed off. "If you really like Sarah Linton, then you don't want her to know me." All Faith could think to say was his name. Will. He gave a forced laugh. "We gotta stop talking about this stuff before one of us starts lactating." He took out his cell phone. "It's almost 8. Amanda will be waiting for you in the interrogation room." "Are you going to watch?" "I'm going to make some calls up to Michigan and annoy the crap out of them until they run those fingerprints we found on Anna's fire escape. Why don't you call me when you're out of your doctor's appointment? If Sam found the right Jake Berman, we can go talk to him together." Faith had forgotten about her doctor's appointment. If he's the right Jake Berman, then we should scoop him up immediately. "I'll call you if that's the case. Otherwise, go to your doctor's appointment, then we'll start from scratch like we'd planned." She listed it off. The Coldfields, Rick Sigler, Olivia Tanner's brother. That should keep us busy. "You know what's bugging me?" Will shook his head, and she told him, "We haven't gotten the reports from Rockdale County yet." She held up her hands, knowing Rockdale was a sore point. If we're going to start from the beginning, we need to do just that. Get the initial crime scene report from the first responding cop and go over every detail point by point. I know Galloway said the guy's fishing in Montana, but if his notes are good, then we don't need to talk to him. What are you looking for? I don't know, but it bothers me that Galloway hasn't faxed it over. He's not exactly on top of things. No, but everything he's held back until now has been for a reason. You said it yourself. People don't do stupid things without a logical explanation. I'll put a call into his office and see if the secretary can handle it without getting Galloway involved. You should get those scratches on the back of your hand looked at, too. He glanced down at his hand. I think you've looked at them plenty. Except for talking to Anna Lindsay in the hospital the day before, Faith had never worked directly with Amanda on a case. The extent of their interaction tended to be with a desk between them. Amanda on one side, with her hands steepled in front of her like a disapproving schoolmarm, and Faith fidgeting in her chair as she gave her report. Because of this, Faith tended to forget that Amanda had clawed her way up the ranks back during a time when women in uniform were relegated to fetching coffee and typing reports. They weren't even allowed to carry guns, because the brass thought that, given the choice between shooting a bad guy and breaking a nail, the latter would win out. Amanda had been the first female officer to disabuse them of this theory. She had been at the bank cashing her paycheck when a robber decided to take an early withdrawal. One of the tellers had panicked, and the robber had started to pistol whip her. Amanda shot him once in the heart, what was called a K5 for the circle it corresponded to on the shooting range target. She told Faith once that she had gotten her nails done afterward. Odik Simkov, the doorman from Anna Lindsay's building, would have benefited from knowing this story. Or maybe not. The little troll had an air of arrogance about him, despite being stuffed into a too small day-glow orange prison uniform and open-toed sandals that had been worn by 1,000 prisoners before him. His face was bruised and battered, but he still held himself upright, shoulders squared. As Faith entered the interrogation room, he gave her the same look of appraisal a farmer might give a cow. Cal Finney, Simkov's lawyer, made a show of looking at his watch. Faith had seen him on television many times. Finney's commercials had their own annoying jingle. He was as handsome in person as he was on the set. The watch on his arm could have put Jeremy through college. "Sorry I'm late." Faith directed the apology toward Amanda, knowing she was the only one who mattered. She sat in the chair opposite Finney, catching the look of distaste on Simkov's face as he openly stared at her. This was not a man who had learned to respect women. Maybe Amanda would change that.
"Thank you for speaking with us, Mr. Simkov,"
Amanda began. She was still using her pleasant voice. But Faith had been in enough meetings with her boss to know that Simkov was in trouble. She had her hands resting lightly on a file folder. If experience was anything to go by, she would open the folder at some point, unleashing the gates of hell. She said,
"We just have a few questions to ask you regarding—"
"Screw you, lady," Simkov barked. "Talk to my lawyer."
"Dr. Wagner," Finney said, "I'm sure you're aware that we filed a lawsuit against the city this morning for police brutality."
He snapped open his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers, which he dropped with a thunk on the table. Faith felt her face flush, but Amanda didn't seem fazed.
"I understand that, Mr. Finney, but your client is looking at a charge of obstructing justice in a particularly heinous case. Under his watch, one of the tenants in his building was abducted. She was raped and tortured. She barely managed to escape with her life. I'm sure you saw it on the news. Her child was left to die, again under Mr. Simkov's watch. The victim will never regain her vision. You can see why we are somewhat frustrated that your client has been less than forthcoming about what exactly was going on in his building."
"I know nothing," Simkov insisted, his accent so thick Faith expected him at any moment to start talking about capturing moose and squirrel. He told the lawyer, "Get me out of here. Why am I a prisoner? I am soon a wealthy man." Finney ignored his client, asking Amanda, "How long will this take?"
"Not long."
Her smile indicated otherwise. Finney wasn't fooled. "You've got 10 minutes. Keep all your questions to the Anna Lindsay case," he advised Simkov. "Your cooperation now will reflect well during your civil suit." Unsurprisingly, he was swayed by the prospect of money. "Yeah, okay. What are your questions?"
"Tell me, Mr. Simkov," Amanda continued, "how long have you been in our country?"
Simkov glanced at his lawyer, who nodded that he should answer. 27 years.
"You speak English very well. Would you describe yourself as fluent, or should I get a translator here to make you more comfortable?"
"I am perfect with my English." His chest puffed out. "I read American books and newspapers all the time."
"You are from Czechoslovakia," Amanda said. "Is that correct?"
"I am Czech," he told her, probably because his country no longer existed.
"Why do you ask me questions? I am suing you. You should be answering my questions." "You have to be a United States citizen in order to sue the government."
Finney piped up. "Mr. Simkov is a legal resident."
"You took my green card," Simkov added. "It was in my wallet. I saw you see it." "You certainly did."
Amanda opened the folder, and Faith felt her heart leap.
"Thank you for that. It saved me some time."
She slipped on her glasses and read from a page in the folder.
"Green cards issued between 1979 and 1989, containing no expiration date, must be replaced within 120 days of this notice. Affected lawful permanent residents must file an application to replace lawful permanent residence card, Form I-90, in order to replace their current green card, or their permanent lawful resident status will be terminated."
She put the page down.
"Does that sound familiar to you, Mr. Simkov?"
Finney held out his hand.
"Let me see that."
Amanda passed him the notice.
Mr. Simkov, I'm afraid Immigration and Naturalization Services has no record of you filing Form I-90 to renew your legal status as a resident in this country.
Bullshit, Simkov countered, but his eyes went nervously to his lawyer. Amanda passed Finney another sheet of paper.
This is a photocopy of Mr. Simkov's green card. You'll note there's no expiration date. He's in violation of his terms of status. I'm afraid we'll have to turn him over to the INS.
She smiled sweetly.
I also got a call from Homeland Security this morning. I had no idea Czech-made weapons were falling into the hands of terrorists. Mr. Simkov, I believe you were a metal worker before you came to America?
I was a farrier, he shot back. I put shoes on horses.
Still, you have a specialized knowledge of metal tooling.
Finney muttered a curse. You people are unbelievable, you know that. Amanda was leaning back in her chair.
I don't recall from your commercials, Mr. Finney. Do you have a subspecialty in immigration law?
She gave a cheery whistle, a pitch-perfect imitation of the jingle on Finney's television commercials. You think you're going to get away with a beatdown on a technicality? Look at this man. Finney pointed to his client, and Faith had to concede the lawyer's point. Simkov's nose was twisted to the side where the cartilage had been shattered. His right eye was so swollen the lid wouldn't open more than a slit. Even his ear was damaged. An angry row of stitches bisected the lobe where Will's fist had split the skin in two. Finney said, Your officer beat the shit out of him, and you think that's okay? He didn't expect an answer. Otik Simkov fled a communist regime and came to this country to start his life all over again from scratch. You think what you're doing to him now is what the Constitution is all about? Amanda had an answer for everything.
The Constitution is for innocent people.
Finney snapped his briefcase closed.
I'm calling a press conference. I'd be more than happy to tell them how Mr. Simkov made a whore suck him off before he'd let her go up to feed a dying 6-month-old baby.
She leaned over the table.
Tell me, Mr. Simkov, did you give her a few extra minutes with the child if she swallowed?
Finney took a second to regroup.
I'm not denying this man is an asshole, but even assholes have rights.
Amanda gave Simkov an icy smile.
Only if they're United States citizens.
Unbelievable, Amanda. Finney seemed genuinely disgusted. This is going to catch up with you one day, you know that, don't you? Amanda was having some kind of staring contest with Simkov, blocking out everything else in the room. Finney turned his attention to Faith. Are you all right with this, officer? Are you okay with your partner beating up a witness? Faith wasn't at all okay with it, but now was not the time to equivocate. It's special agent, actually. Officer is generally what you call patrolman. This is great. Atlanta's the new Guantanamo Bay. He turned back to Simkov. Otik, don't let them push you around. You have rights. Simkov was still staring at Amanda as if he thought he could break her somehow. His eyes moved back and forth, reading her resistance. Finally, he gave a tight nod. Okay, I drop my lawsuit. You make this other stuff go away. Finney didn't want to hear it. As your lawyer, I'm advising you to—
You're not his lawyer anymore, Amanda interrupted. Isn't that right, Mr. Simkov?
Correct, he agreed. He crossed his arms, staring straight ahead. Finney muttered another curse.
This isn't over. Well, I think it is,
Amanda told him. She picked up the stack of pages detailing the suit against the city. Finney cursed her again, adding Faith for good measure, then left the room. Amanda tossed the lawsuit into the trash can. Faith listened to the noise the pages made as they fluttered through the air. She was glad that Will was not here, because as much as Faith's conscience was bothering her over this, Will's was nearly killing him. Finney was right. Will was getting away with a beatdown thanks to a technicality. If Faith hadn't been in that hallway yesterday, she might be feeling differently right now. She summoned the image of Balthazar Lindsay lying in the recycling bin a few feet from his mother's penthouse apartment. And all that came to mind were excuses for Will's behavior.
"So," Amanda said, "shall we assume there's honor among criminals, Mr. Simkov?"
Simkov nodded appreciatively.
"You are a very hard woman."
Amanda seemed pleased with the assessment, and Faith could see how thrilled she was to be back in an interrogation room again. It probably bored her to death sitting through organizational meetings and looking at budgets and flowcharts all day. No wonder terrorizing Will was her only hobby.
She said, "Tell me about the scam you had going on in the apartments."
He gave an open-handed shrug.
"These rich people are always traveling. Sometimes I rent out the space to someone. They go in, they do a little." He made a screwing gesture with his hands. "Otik gets a little money. The maid's in the next day. Everyone is happy."
Amanda nodded, as if this was a perfectly understandable arrangement.
"What happened with Anna Lindsay's place?" "I figure, why not cash out? That asshole, Mr. Regis in 9A, he knew something was up. He don't smoke. He come back from one of his business trips and there was a cigarette burn on his carpet. I saw it, barely there. No big deal. But Regis caused some problems. And they fired you." 2-week notice, good referral." He shrugged again. "I already got another job lined up. Bunch of townhouses over near the Phipps Plaza. 24-hour watch, very classy place. Me and this other guy, we switch out. He takes days, I take the nights." "When did you first notice Anna Lindsay was missing?" "Always at 7 o'clock. She comes down with the baby. Then one day she's not there. I check my message box where the tenants leave me things. Mostly complaints. Can't get the window open, can't figure out the television, stuff that's not my job, right? Anyway, there's a note from Miss Lindsay saying she's on vacation for 2 weeks. I figure she must have left. Usually they tell me where they go, but maybe she thinks since I won't be here when she's back, it don't matter."
That jibed with what Anna Lindsay said. Amanda asked,
"Is that how she usually communicated with you, through notes?"
He nodded.
"She don't like me. Says I'm sloppy."
His lip curled in disgust.
"Made the building buy me a uniform so I look like a monkey. Made me say yes ma'am and no ma'am to her like I'm a child."
That sounded like the kind of thing their victim profile trended toward. Faith asked, "How did you know she was gone?"
"I don't see her come downstairs. Usually she go to the gym, she go to the store, she take the baby for walks. Once helped getting the stroller in and out of the elevator." He shrugged. "I think she must be gone."
Amanda said,
"So, you assumed Ms. Lindsay would be gone for 2 weeks, which coincided nicely with the date your employment would terminate."
"Easy peasy," he agreed.
"Who did you call?"
"This pimp, the dead guy." For the first time, Simkov seemed to lose a bit of his arrogance.
"He's not so bad. They call him Freddy. I don't know his real name, but he was always honest with me. Not like some of the others. I tell him 2 hours, he stay 2 hours. He pay for the maid. That's it. Some of the other guys, they get a little pushy, try to negotiate, don't leave when they're supposed to. I push back. I don't call them when an apartment's available. Freddy, he filmed a music video up there once. I watch for it on the TV, but I don't see. Maybe he couldn't find an agent. Music is a hard business." "The party at Anna Lindsay's got out of hand."
Amanda stated the obvious.
"Yeah, out of hand," he agreed. "Freddy's a good guy. I don't go up there to check on them. Every time I'm in the elevator, someone say, 'Oh, Mr. Simkov, could you look at this in my apartment? Could you water my plants? Could you walk my dog?' Not my job, but they trap you like that. What can you say? Fuck off? No, you can't. So I stay at my desk, tell them I can't do anything because my job is to watch the desk, not walk their puppy dogs, right?"
Amanda said,
"That apartment was a mess. It's hard to believe it got that bad in just a week."
He shrugged.
"These people, they got no respect for nothing. They shit in the corner like dogs. Me, I'm not surprised. They're all fucking animals. Do anything to get the drug in their arm." "What about the baby?"
Amanda asked.
"The whore, Lola. I thought she was going up there to do some business. Freddie was there. Lola got a soft spot for him. I didn't know he was dead, or that they had trashed Miss Lindsay's place, obviously. How often was Lola going up there? I don't keep up with it. Couple times a day. I figure she get a bump every now and then.
He rubbed his hand under his nose, sniffing, the universal sign for snorting coke.
She not so bad. A good woman brought down by bad circumstance.
Simkov didn't seem to realize he was one of the bad circumstances. Faith asked, "Did you see anything unusual in the building over the last 2 weeks?" He barely gave her a glance, asking Amanda,
"Why is this girl asking me questions?"
Faith had been snubbed before, but she knew this guy needed to be on a short leash. "You want me to get my partner back in here to talk to you?" He snorted, as if the thought of another beatdown was inconsequential. But he answered Faith's question.
"What do you mean, unusual? It's Buckhead. Unusual is everywhere."
Anna Lindsay's penthouse had probably set her back $3 million. The woman hardly lived in the ghetto. "Did you see any strangers loitering around?" Faith persisted. He waved her off.
"Strangers everywhere. This is a big city."
Faith thought about their killer. He had to have access to the building in order to taser Anna and take her away from the apartment. Simkov obviously wasn't going to make this easy, so she tried to bluff him. "You know what I'm talking about, Otik. Don't bullshit me or I'll have my partner go back to work on your ugly face." He shrugged again, but there was something different about the gesture. Faith waited him out, and he finally said,
"I'd go for a smoke sometimes behind the building."
The fire escape that led to the roof was behind the building. "What did you see?"
"A car," he said. "Silver, 4-door.
Faith tried to keep her reaction calm. Both the Coldfields and the family from Tennessee had seen a white sedan speeding away from the accident. It had been dusk. Maybe they had mistaken the silver car for white. "Did you get a license plate number?" He shook his head.
"I saw the ladder to the fire escape was unlatched. I went up to the roof."
"On the ladder?"
"Elevator. I can't climb that ladder. It's 23 floors. I got a bad knee."
"What did you see on the roof?"
"There was a soda can there. Someone used it for an ashtray. Lots of butts inside."
"Where was it?"
"On the ledge of the roof, right by the ladder."
"What did you do with it?"
"I kicked it off," he said, giving another one of his shrugs. "Watched it hit the ground. It exploded like—"
He put his hands together, then flung them apart.
"Pretty spectacular."
Faith had been behind that building, had searched it top to bottom. "We didn't find any cigarette butts or a soda can behind the building."
"That's what I'm saying. Next day it was all gone. Someone cleaned it up."
"And the silver car?"
"Gone too."
"You're sure you didn't see any suspicious men hanging around the building?" He blew out a puff of air.
"No, lady, I told you, just the root beer."
"What root beer?"
"The soda can. It was Doc Peterson's root beer."
The same as they'd found in the basement of the house behind Olivia Tanner's. Chapter 22. As Will drove to Jake Berman's house in Coweta County, he debated with himself the level of fury Faith would feel when she found out that he had tricked her. He wasn't sure which would make her angrier, the outright lie he had told her on the phone about Sam finding the wrong Jake Berman, or the fact that Will was going down south to talk to the man on his own. There was no way she would have kept her doctor's appointment if Will had told her that the real Jake Berman was alive and well and living on Lester Drive. She would have insisted on coming along, and Will wouldn't have been able to come up with a good excuse for her not to, other than that she was pregnant and diabetic and had enough on her plate without having to put herself at risk by interviewing a witness who could very well be a suspect. That would have gone over really well with Faith, like a lead football over the Mississippi. Will had gotten Caroline, Amanda's assistant, to cross-reference Jake Berman with the address on Lester Drive. With that key piece of information, they had opened up Berman's background fairly easily. The mortgage was in his wife's name, as were all of the credit cards, the cable bill, and the utilities. Lydia Berman was a school teacher. Jake Berman had drawn his full lot of unemployment and still not found a job. He had declared bankruptcy 18 months ago. he'd walked away from around $500,000 in debt. The reason behind his being hard to find might have been as simple as a desire to elude creditors. Considering he'd been arrested a few months ago for public indecency, it made sense that Berman would want to keep a low profile. Then again, it would also all make sense if Berman was their suspect. The Porsche wasn't comfortable for long distances, and Will's back was aching by the time he reached Lester Drive. Traffic had been worse than usual. An overturned tractor-trailer jackknifed across the interstate, bringing everything to a standstill for almost a full hour. Will hadn't wanted to be alone with his thoughts. He had listened to every station on the dial by the time he crossed into Coweta County. Will pulled up beside an unmarked Chevy Caprice at the mouth of Lester Drive. A lawnmower was sticking out of the back of the trunk. The man behind the wheel was dressed in overalls, a thick gold chain hanging around his neck. Will recognized Nick Shelton, the regional field agent for District 23.
"How they hangin'?"
Nick asked, turning down the bluegrass blaring from the radio. Will had met the agent a few times before. He was so country his neck glowed red, but he was a solid investigator, and he knew how to do his job. Will asked, "Is Berman still in the house?"
"Unless he sneaked out the back," Nick answered. "Don't worry, he struck me as the lazy type."
"Did you talk to him?"
"Posed as a landscaper looking for work."
Nick handed him a business card.
"I told him it'd be $100 a month, and he said he could take care of his own damn lawn, thank you very much."
He snorted a laugh.
"This from a guy who's still in his pajamas at 10 o'clock in the morning."
Will looked at the card, seeing a drawing of a lawnmower and some flowers. He said, "Nice."
"The fake phone number comes in handy with the ladies."
Nick chuckled again.
"I got a good look at old Jakey while he was lecturing me on competitive pricing. He's definitely your guy."
"Did you get into the house?"
"He wasn't that stupid," Nick asked. "You want me to stick around?"
Will thought about the situation, the fact that if he had given her the chance, Faith would have been right. Don't go into an unknown situation without backup. "If you don't mind, just hang back here and make sure I don't get my head blown off." They both laughed a little louder than the words called for, probably because Will wasn't really joking. He rolled up his window and drove down the road. Just to make things easier, Caroline had called Berman before Will had left the office. She had posed as an operator for the local cable television company. Berman had assured her he would be home to let in the technician who was doing a general upgrade so that their service wouldn't be interrupted. There were a lot of tricks you could use to make sure people were home. The cable ruse was the best. People would go without a lot of things, but they would put their lives on hold for days at a time in order to wait for the cable company to show up. Will checked the numbers on the mailbox, making sure they matched the notes Sam Lawson had given Faith. Courtesy of MapQuest, which printed large arrows on their directions, and a couple of stops at some convenience stores, Will had managed to navigate his way through the rural town with only a few wrong turns. Still, he checked the number with the mailbox a third time before getting out of the car. He saw the heart Sam had drawn around the address and wondered again why a man who was not the father of Faith's child would do such a thing. Will had only met the reporter once, but he didn't like him. Victor was all right. Will had talked to him on the phone a couple of times and sat by him during an incredibly tedious awards ceremony that Amanda had insisted her team attend, mostly because she wanted to make sure someone clapped when her name was called. Victor had wanted to talk about sports, but not football and baseball, which were the only two sports Will paid attention to. Hockey was for Yankees and soccer was for Europeans. He wasn't quite sure how Victor had gotten interested in both, but it made for pretty dull conversation. Whatever Faith had seen in the guy, Will had been glad a few months ago when he started to notice that Victor's car wasn't in Faith's driveway when he went to pick her up for court days. Of course, Will was not one to judge about relationships. His whole body was still sore from being with Angie last night. It was not a good sore. It was the kind of sore that made you want to crawl up into bed and sleep for a week. Will knew from experience it wouldn't matter, because as soon as he started putting one foot in front of the other, rebuilding some semblance of a life, Angie would return, and he'd be back in that same place again. It was the pattern of his life. Nothing was ever going to change it. The Berman home was a one-story ranch spread out over a large lot. The house looked lived in, but not in a good way. The grass was overgrown, and weeds tangled the flower beds. The green Camry in the driveway was filthy. Mud caked the tires, and there was a sheen of filth on the car that looked like it had been there for quite a while. There were 2 baby seats in back, and the requisite Cheerios stuck to the windshield. 2 yellow diamond-shaped signs were hanging from the side window, probably reading "Baby on Board." Will pressed his hand to the hood of the car. The engine was cold. He looked at the time on his phone. It was coming up on 10 o'clock. Faith would probably be at her doctor's by now. Will knocked on the door and waited. He thought about Faith again, how furious she would be, especially if Will was about to come face to face with the killer. Though it looked as if he wasn't going to come face to face with anyone. No one answered the door. He knocked on the door again. When that didn't work, he stepped back from the house and looked up at the windows. All the shades were open. Some lights were on. Maybe Berman was in the shower. Or maybe he was fully aware that the police were trying to talk to him. Nick's hayseed landscaper act was pretty impressive, but he'd been sitting at the end of the road for about an hour. In a neighborhood this small, phones had probably been ringing off the hook. Will tried the front door, but it was locked. He walked around the house, peering in the windows. There was a light at the end of the hallway. He was going to the next window when he heard a noise inside, like a door slamming shut. Will put his hand to the gun on his belt, feeling all the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Something wasn't right, and Will was keenly aware that Nick Shelton was sitting in his car listening to the radio right now. There was the unmistakable sound of a window banging shut. Will jogged around to the back of the house in time to see a man darting through the backyard. Jake Berman was wearing pajama pants with no shirt, but he'd managed to put on his sneakers. He glanced over his shoulder as he ran past an elaborate swing set toward the chain-link fence that separated the property from the neighbor on the opposite side. "Crap," Will mumbled, bolting after him. Will was a good runner, but Berman was fast, his arms pumping, legs moving in a blur. "Police!" Will yelled, misjudging the height of the fence so badly that his foot caught. He fell to the ground and scrambled up as quickly as he could. He saw Berman go down a side yard, past another house and toward the street. Will did the same, taking advantage of the angle, shortening the distance as he chased Berman across the road. There was a screech of wheels as Nick Shelton's Caprice pulled up. Berman dodged the car, slamming his hand on the hood as he made his way toward another backyard. "Damn it," Will cursed. "Police, stop!" Berman kept going, but he was a sprinter, not a marathoner. If Will was good at anything, it was endurance. He caught his second wind as Jake Berman slowed, trying to open the wooden gate to a neighbor's backyard. He glanced over his shoulder, saw Will, then took off again. Berman was too winded, though, and Will could tell from the slow way his legs were moving that the man was about to give up. Still, Will wasn't going to take any chances. When he got close enough, he lunged, bringing Berman down in a heavy tackle that knocked the wind out of both of them. "Dumbass!" Nick Shelton yelled, kicking Berman in the side. Considering his run-in with the doorman at Anna's building yesterday, Will would have thought he'd be more gentle in his approach. But his heart was beating so hard in his chest that he felt nauseated. Worse, adrenaline was pumping all kinds of bad thoughts into his head. Nick kicked Berman again. "Never run from the law, motherfucker!" "I didn't know you were cops! Shut up!" Will started to put the cuffs on him, but Berman squirmed, trying to get away. Nick raised his foot again, but Will drove his knee into Berman's back, so hard that he could feel the ribs bend. "Stop it!" "I didn't do anything!" "Is that why you ran?" "I was going for a run!" he screamed. "I always run this time of day." Nick asked. "In your PJs?" "Fuck off." "It's a felony to lie to the police." Will stood, yanking up Berman with him. 5 years in prison, plenty of men's bathrooms in jail. Berman's face turned white. Some of his neighbors had congregated. They didn't look happy, or, Will noticed, particularly supportive. "It's all right," Berman told them. Just a misunderstanding,
Nick said. A misunderstanding by this dumbass who thinks he can run away from the police.
Will wasn't worried about appearances. He jerked Berman's hands high, making him bend over as he walked him back across the street.
My lawyer's going to hear about this,
Nick said. Be sure to tell him how you ran away like a scared little schoolgirl. Will pushed Berman into the road. He asked Nick, Mind calling this in? You want the cavalry? I want a police car screeching up to his house with lights and sirens blaring so everyone in the neighborhood knows it's there. Nick gave him a salute as he trotted off toward his car. Berman said, You're making a mistake. Your mistake was fleeing the scene of a crime. What? He turned around, a look of genuine surprise on his face. What crime? Route 316. He still looked confused. That's what this is about? Either the man was delivering an Oscar-worthy performance, or he was completely clueless. You witnessed a car accident 4 days ago on 316. A woman was hit by a car. You talked to my partner. I didn't leave that girl alone. The ambulance was there. I told that cop at the hospital everything I saw. You gave a false phone number and address. I was just... He glanced around, and Will wondered if he was going to bolt again. Get me out of here, Berman pleaded. Just take me to the police station, okay? Take me to the station, give me my phone call, and we'll work all of this out. Will turned him around, keeping a hand on his shoulder, in case the man decided to try his luck again. Every step, Will could feel his temper getting more and more riled up. Berman was looking more and more like a pathetic, weaselly excuse for a human being. They had wasted the last 2 days looking for the asshole, and then the idiot had made Will chase him across half the neighborhood. Berman turned around. Why don't you take off these cuffs so I can... Will spun him back around so hard that he had to catch Berman before he fell flat on his face. The nearest neighbor was standing in her open front doorway, watching them. Like the other women, she didn't look exactly displeased to see the man being led away in handcuffs. Will asked, Do they hate you because you're gay, or because you're sponging off your wife? Berman spun around again. Where the fuck do you get off? Will pushed him back around so hard that this time he lost his balance. It's 10 o'clock and you're still in your pajamas. He marched Berman through the tall grass in his yard. You don't have a lawnmower? We can't afford a gardener. Where are your kids? Daycare. He tried to turn around again. What business is this of yours? Will shoved him again, forcing him to go up the driveway. He hated the guy for so many reasons, not least of which because he had a wife and kids who probably cared about him a great deal, and he couldn't even cut the grass or wash the car for them. Berman demanded, Where are you taking me? I said take me to the police station. Will kept quiet, shoving him up the driveway, yanking up his arms whenever he slowed or tried to turn around. If I'm under arrest, then you have to take me to jail. They walked to the back of the house, Berman protesting the entire way. He was a man who was used to being listened to, and it seemed to irk him more to be ignored than to be pushed around. So Will kept silent as he shoved him toward the patio. Will tried the back door, but it was locked. He looked at Berman, whose smug look seemed to indicate he thought he was getting the upper hand. The window the man had sneaked out had guillotined closed. He slid it back open, the cheap springs clanging. Berman said, Don't worry, I'll wait for you. Will wondered where Nick Shelton was. He was probably in front of the house, thinking he was doing Will a favor by giving him time alone with the suspect. Right, Will muttered, loosening one side of the cuffs and clamping Berman to the barbecue grill. He lifted himself up and angled his body through the open window. Will found himself in the kitchen, which was decorated in a goose theme. Geese on the wallpaper border, geese on the towels, geese on the carpet under the kitchen table. He looked back out the window. Berman was there, smoothing down his pajamas like he was trying them on at Macy's. Will did a quick check of the house, finding only what he expected. A children's room with bunk beds, a large master and attached bath, a kitchen, a family room, and a study with one book on the shelves. Will couldn't read the title, but he recognized Donald Trump's picture on the jacket and assumed it was a get-rich-quick scheme. Obviously, Jake Berman hadn't taken the man's advice. Though, considering Berman had lost his job and declared bankruptcy, maybe he had. There was no basement, and the garage was empty but for 3 boxes that seemed to contain the contents of Jake Berman's old office. A stapler, a nice desk set, lots of papers with charts and graphs on them. Will opened the sliding glass door to the patio and found Berman sitting under the grill, his arm dangling over his head. "You have no right to search my house. You were fleeing your residence. That's all the cause I needed." Berman seemed to buy the explanation, which sounded reasonable, even to Will's ears, though he knew it was highly illegal. Will dragged around a chair from the table set and sat down. The air was still chilly, and the sweat he'd generated from chasing after Berman was drying in the cold. "This isn't fair," Berman said. "I want your badge number and your name and—" "You want the real one, or you want me to make up something like you did?" Berman had the sense not to answer. "Why did you run, Jake? Where were you going to go in your pajamas?" "I didn't think that far," he grumbled. "I just don't want to deal with this right now. I've got a lot on my plate." "You've got 2 choices here. Either you tell me what happened that night, or I take you to jail in your pajamas." To make the threat clear, Will added, "And I don't mean the Quetta Country Club. I'll stroll you straight into the Atlanta pen, and I won't let you change." He pointed to Berman's chest, which was heaving up and down from panic and anger. The man obviously spent time on his body. He was cut, his abs well-defined, his shoulders broad and muscled. You'll find all those pull-ups at the gym didn't go to waste. "Is that what this is about? You're some kind of homophobic jerk?" "I don't care who you're blowing in the toilet." This much was true, though Will kept an edge to his voice to imply the opposite. Everybody had a button, and Berman's was his sexual orientation. At the moment, Will's seemed to be that the cheating prick chained to the Grillmaster 2000 was screwing around on his wife and expecting her to just suck it up and be a good spouse. The Oprah-esque irony was not lost on Will. He said, "The guys down at the pen love it when new meat comes along." "Fuck you." "Oh, they will. They'll fuck you in places you didn't know could be fucked." "Go to hell." Will let him sulk for a few seconds, trying to get his own emotions under control. He concentrated on how much time they had pissed away looking for this pathetic idiot when they could have been following real clues. Will listed it out for him. Resisting arrest, lying to the police, wasting police time, obstructing an investigation. You could get 10 years for this, Jake. And that's if the judge likes you. Which is doubtful considering you've got a record and you present like an arrogant asshole. Berman seemed to finally realize that he was in trouble. "I've got kids." There was a pleading sound to his voice. "My sons." "Yeah, I read about them in your arrest report when they picked you up at the Mall of Georgia." Berman looked down at the concrete patio. "What do you want?" "I want the truth." "I don't know what the truth is anymore." He was obviously feeling sorry for himself again. Will wanted to kick him in the face, but he knew that would accomplish nothing. "You need to understand, I'm not your therapist, Jake. I don't care about your crisis of conscience, or that you have kids, or that you're cheating on your wife. I love her," he said, for the first time showing an emotion other than self-pity. "I love my wife." Will pulled back on the pressure, trying to get his temper under control. He could be mad, or he could get information. Only one of them was the reason he was here. Berman said, "I used to be somebody. I used to have a job. I used to go to work every day." He looked up at the house. "I used to live somewhere nice. I drove a Mercedes." "You were a builder?" Will asked, though he'd been told as much when Caroline had found Berman's tax returns. "High-rises," he said. "The bottom dropped out of the market. I was lucky to walk away with the clothes on my back." "Is that why you put everything in your wife's name?" He gave a slow nod. "I was ruined. We moved here from Montgomery a year ago. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but—" He shrugged, as if it was pointless to continue. Will had thought his accent was a little deeper than most. "Is that where you're originally from? Alabama?" "Met my wife there. Both of us went to Alabama. He meant the state university. Lydia was an English major. It was more like a hobby until I lost my job. Now she's teaching at school and I'm with the kids all day. He stared out at the playset, the swings stirring in the wind. I used to travel a lot, he said. That's how I got it out of my system. I'd travel around and I'd do what I needed to do. And then I'd come home and be with my wife and go to church. And that's how it worked for almost 10 years. You were arrested 6 months ago. I told Lydia it was a mistake. All those queers from Atlanta trolling the mall, trying to pick up straight men. The cops were clamping down. They thought I was one because... I don't know what I told her. Because I had a nice haircut. She wanted to believe me, so she did. Will guessed he'd be forgiven for his sympathies leaning more toward the spouse who was being lied to and cheated on. Tell me what happened on 316. We saw the accident. People in the road. I should have been more helpful. The other man, I don't even know his name. He had medical training. He was trying to help the woman who'd been hit by the car. I was just standing there in the street trying to think of a lie to tell my wife. I don't think she'd believe me if it happened again, no matter what I came up with. How did you meet him? I was supposed to be at the bar watching a game. I saw him go into the theater. He was a nice-looking guy, alone. I knew why he was there. He gave a heavy sigh. I followed him into the bathroom. We decided to go somewhere else for more privacy. Jake Berman was no neophyte, and Will didn't ask him why he had driven 40 minutes away from his home in order to watch a game at a bar. Coweta might have been rural, but Will had passed at least 3 sports bars as he headed off the interstate, and there were even more downtown. Will warned him, "You have to know that it was dangerous getting into a car with a stranger like that." I guess I've been lonely, the man admitted. I wanted to be with somebody. Be myself with somebody. He said we could go in his car, maybe find a place out in the woods to be together for more than a few minutes in the toilet. He gave a harsh laugh. The smell of urine is not a big aphrodisiac for me, believe it or not. He looked Will in the eye. Does it make you sick to hear about this? No, Will answered truthfully. He had listened to countless witnesses tell stories of meaningless hookups and mindless sex. It really didn't matter if it was a man or a woman or both. The emotions were similar, and Will's goal was always the same: get the information he needed to break the case. Jake obviously knew Will wasn't going to give him much more rope. He said, "We were driving down the road, and the guy I was with, Rick." Rick, right. He looked as if he wished he didn't know the man's name. Rick was driving. He had his pants unbuttoned. Jake colored again. He pushed me away. He said there was something on the road ahead. He started to slow down, and I saw what looked like a bad accident. He paused, measuring his words, his culpability. I told him to keep driving, but he said he was a paramedic, that he couldn't leave the scene of an accident. I guess that's some kind of code or something. He paused again, and Will guessed he was forcing himself to remember what had happened. Will told him, "Take your time." Jake nodded, giving it a few seconds. Rick got out of the car, and I stayed inside. There was this old couple standing in the street. The man was clutching his chest. I kept sitting there in the car, just staring like it was all a movie being played out. The older woman got on the phone, I guess to call an ambulance. It was weird, because she kept her hand to her mouth like this. He cupped his hand over his mouth the way Judith Coldfield did when she smiled. It was like she was telling a secret, but there was no one around to hear, so he shrugged. "Did you get out of the car?" "Yeah," he answered. "I finally moved. I could hear the ambulance coming. I went to the old guy. I think his name was Henry?" Will nodded. "Yeah, Henry. He was in bad shape. I think both of them were in shock. Judith's hands were shaking like crazy. The other guy, Rick, he was working on the naked woman. I didn't see much of her. It was hard to see, Hard to look at her, I mean. I remember when their son got there, he just stared at her like, oh, Jesus." "Wait a minute," Will said. "Judith Coldfield's son was at the scene?" "Yeah." Will went back through his interview with the Coldfields, wondering why Tom would leave out such an important detail. There had been plenty of opportunity for the man to speak up, even with his domineering mother in the room. What time did the son get there? About 5 minutes before the ambulance? Will felt ridiculous for repeating everything Berman said, but he had to be clear. Tom Coldfield got to the scene before the ambulance arrived? He was there before the cops. They didn't even show up until after the ambulances had left. No one was there. It was brutal. We had like 20 minutes with that girl just dying in the road, and no one came to help her. Will felt a piece of the puzzle click into place. Not the one they needed for the case, but the one that explained why Max Galloway had been so openly hostile about sharing information. The detective must have known that the ambulance had taken the victim away before the police arrived. Faith had been right all along. There was a reason Rockdale wasn't faxing over the initial responders' report, and that reason was because they were covering their asses. Slow police response times were the sort of thing local news stations built their feature stories on. This was the last straw as far as Will was concerned. He would have Galloway's detective shield by the end of the day. There was no telling what other evidence had been hidden, or worse, compromised. "Hey," Berman said, "you want to hear this or not?" Will realized he had been too caught up in his own thoughts. He picked up the narrative. "So Tom Coldfield showed up," he said. "Then the ambulances came?" "Just one at first. They put the woman in first, the one who'd been hit by the car. Henry said he would wait because he wanted to go with his wife, and there wasn't room for all of them in one ambulance. There was kind of an argument about it, but Rick said go, just go, because he knew the woman was in a bad way. He gave me the keys to his car and got into the ambulance so he could keep working on her." "How long before the next ambulance arrived?" "About 10, maybe 15 minutes later." Will did the math in his head. Almost 45 minutes had elapsed in the story, and the police still hadn't shown up. Then what? "They loaded up Henry and Judith, the son followed them, and I was left in the road." "And the police still weren't there?" "I heard the sirens right after the last ambulance left. The car was there, the one the Coldfields had been driving. The scene of the crime, right?" He looked back at the playset in the yard, as if he could visualize his children playing in the sun. "I thought about taking Rick's car back to the theater. They wouldn't know me, right? I mean, you wouldn't have any way of identifying me if I hadn't gone to the hospital and given my name." Will shrugged, but it was true. If not for the fact that Jake Berman had given them his real name, Will wouldn't be sitting here right now. Jake continued. "So I got in the car and headed back toward the theater. Toward the police cars. They were coming in the opposite direction. What changed your mind?" He shrugged, and tears came into his eyes. "I was tired of running, I guess. Running away from everything." He put his free hand to his eyes. "Rick told me they were taking her to Grady, so I got on the interstate and went to Grady." His courage had apparently run out shortly afterward, but Will did not point this out to the man. Berman asked, "Is the old man okay?" "He's fine. I heard on the news that the woman's all right. She's healing," Will told him. "What happened to her will always be with her, though. She won't be able to run away from it." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Some kind of lesson for me, right?" His self-pity had returned. "Not that you care, right? You know what I don't like about you. Please enlighten me." "You're cheating on your wife. I don't care who with, it's cheating. If you want to be with someone else, then be with them, but let your wife go. Let her have a life. Let her have someone who really loves her and understands her and wants to be with her." The man shook his head sadly. "You don't understand." Will guessed that Jake Berman was beyond lessons. He stood from the table and uncuffed him from the grill. "Be careful about getting into cars with strangers." "I'm finished with that. I mean it. Never again." He sounded so certain of himself that Will almost believed him. Will had to wait until he was out of Jake Berman's neighborhood before his phone registered enough bars to make a call. Even then, service was spotty, and he had to pull over onto the side of the road just to get a call to go through. He dialed Faith's cell phone and listened to it ring. Her voicemail picked up, and he ended the call. Will checked the clock. 10:15. She was probably still with her doctor in Snellville. Tom Coldfield hadn't mentioned that he had been at the crime scene. Yet another person who had lied to them. Will was getting pretty sick and tired of people lying. He flipped open his phone and dialed information. They connected him to the tower at Charlie Brown Airport, where yet another operator told Will that Tom was taking a cigarette break. Will was in the process of leaving a message when the operator offered to give him Coldfield's cell phone number. A few minutes later, he was listening to Tom Coldfield yell over the sound of a jet engine.
"I'm glad you called, Agent Trent."
His voice was just shy of a shout.
"I left a message for your partner earlier, but I haven't heard back."
Will put his finger in his ear, as if that might help drown out the noise of a plane taking off on the other side of town.
"Did you remember something?" "Oh, nothing like that," Tom said. The roar subsided, and his voice went back to normal. "My folks and I were talking last night, wondering how your investigation was going."
There was a deafening rush of a jet engine. Will waited it out, thinking this was crazy.
"What time do you get off work?" "About 10 minutes, then I've got to pick up the kids from my mom's."
Will figured he would kill two birds with one stone.
"Can you meet me at your parents' house?"
Tom waited for more engine noise to pass.
"Sure. Shouldn't take me more than 45 minutes to get there. Is something wrong?"
Will looked at the clock on the dash.
"I'll see you in 45 minutes.
He ended the call before Tom could ask any more questions. Unfortunately, he also ended it before he could get the Coldfields' address. Their retirement community shouldn't be too hard to find. Claremont Road stretched from one side of DeKalb County to the other, but there was only one area where senior citizens flocked, and that was in the vicinity of the Atlanta Veterans Administration Hospital. Will put the car in gear, got back onto the road, and headed toward the interstate. As Will drove, he debated about whether to call Amanda and tell her that Max Galloway had screwed them over again. But she would ask where Faith was, and Will did not want to remind their boss that Faith was having medical issues. Amanda hated weakness of any kind, and she was relentless where Will's disability was concerned. There was no telling what abuse she would visit on Faith for being diabetic. Will wasn't going to give her more ammunition. He could, of course, call Caroline, who would, in turn, feed the information to Amanda. He cradled the phone in his hand, praying it would not come apart as he dialed in the number for Amanda's assistant. Caroline made much use of her caller ID.
"Hi, Will.
Mind doing me another favor?"
"Sure."
Judith Coldfield called 911, and 2 ambulances got to the scene before the Rockdale police did.
"That ain't right."
No, Will agreed. It wasn't. The fact that Max Galloway had lied meant that instead of talking to a trained first responder about what he had recorded at the scene, Will was going to have to rely on the Coldfields to reconstruct what they had seen. "I need you to track down the timeline. I'm pretty sure Amanda's going to want to know what took them so long." Caroline said, "You know, Rockdale's where I'll call for the response times. Try Judith Coldfield's cell phone records." If Will could catch them in a lie, that would be yet another weapon Amanda could use against them. "Do you have her number?" 404. "Hold on," Will said, thinking it would be useful to have Judith's number. He drove with his fingertips as he took out the digital recorder he kept in his pocket and turned it on. "Go ahead." Caroline gave him Judith Coldfield's cell number. Will clicked off the recorder and put the phone back to his ear to thank her. He used to have a system for keeping up with witnesses and suspects' personal information, but Faith had gradually taken over everything to do with paperwork, so that Will was lost without her. With the next case, he would have to correct that. He didn't like the idea of being so dependent on her, especially since she was pregnant. She'd probably be out at least a week when the baby came. He tried Judith's cell, which only got him as far as her voicemail. He left a message for her, then called Faith again and told her that he was on his way to the Coldfields. Hopefully, she would call him back and give him their address on Claremont Road. He didn't want to call Caroline again because she would wonder why an agent didn't have all this written down somewhere. Besides, his cell phone had started making a clicking noise in his ear. He would have to do something to fix it soon. Will gently placed it on the passenger seat. There was only one string and a quickly degrading piece of duct tape holding it together now. Will kept the radio low as he headed into the city. Instead of going through the downtown connector, he jumped on I-85. Traffic on the Claremont exit was backed up more than usual, so he took the long way, skirting around DeKalb Peachtree Airport, driving through neighborhoods that were so culturally diverse even Faith wouldn't be able to read some of the signs out in front of the businesses. After fighting more traffic, he finally found himself in the right area. He turned into the first gated community across from the VA hospital, knowing the best way to go about this would be the methodical one. The guard at the gate was polite, but the Coldfields weren't on his residence list. The next place yielded the same negative result, but when Will got to the third compound, the nicest one of them all, he hit pay dirt. "Henry and Judith," the man at the gate smiled, as if they were old friends. "I think Hank's out on the links, but Judith should be home." Will waited while the guard made a phone call to get him buzzed in. He looked around the well-kept grounds, feeling a pang of envy. Will didn't have children, and he had no family to speak of. His retirement was something that worried him, and he had been saving a nest egg since his first paycheck. He wasn't a risk-taker, so he hadn't lost much in the stock market. T-bills and municipal bonds were where most of his hard-earned cash went. He was terrified of ending up some lonely old guy in a sad, state-run nursing home. The Coldfields were living the sort of retirement Will was hoping for: a friendly security guard at the gate, nicely kept gardens, a senior center where you could play cards or shuffleboard. Of course, knowing how things worked, Angie would get some terrible wasting disease that lasted just long enough to suck away all his retirement money before she died. "You're in, young man," the guard was smiling, his straight white teeth showing beneath a bushy gray mustache. "Go left right out of the gate, then take another left, then right, and you'll be on Taylor Drive. They're 1693. "Thanks," Will said, understanding only the street name and the numbers. The man had made a hand gesture indicating which way Will should go first, so he went through the gate and turned the car in that direction. After that, it was anyone's guess. "Crap," Will mumbled, obeying the 10-mile-per-hour speed limit as he circled the large lake in the middle of the property. The houses were one-story cottages that all looked the same: weathered shingles, single-car garages, and various assortments of concrete ducks and bunnies spotting the trimmed lawns. There were old people out walking, and when they waved at him, he waved back. He supposed to convey the impression that he knew where he was going, which was not the case. He stopped the car in front of an elderly woman who was dressed in a lilac windsuit. She had ski poles in her hands as if she were Nordic skiing. "Good morning," Will said. "I'm looking for 1693 Taylor Drive."
"Oh, Henry and Judith," the skier exclaimed. "Are you their son?"
He shook his head. "No, ma'am." He didn't want to alarm anyone, so he said, "I'm just a friend of theirs."
"This is a very nice car, isn't it?"
"Thank you, ma'am."
"I bet I couldn't get myself into there," she said. "Maybe even if I got in, I couldn't get out."
He laughed with her to be polite, scratching this particular community off the list of places to which he'd want to retire.
She said, "Do you work with Judith at the homeless shelter?"
Will hadn't been questioned so much since he had trained for interrogations at the GBI Academy. "Yes, ma'am," he lied.
"Got this at their little thrift store," she said, indicating the windsuit. "Looks brand new, doesn't it?"
"It's lovely," Will assured her, though the color was nothing like what you would find in nature.
"Tell Judith I've got some more knickknacks I can give her if she wants to send the truck by."
She gave a knowing look.
"At my age, I find I don't need so many things."
"Yes, ma'am."
"Well," the woman nodded, pleased. "Just go up here to the right."
He watched the way her hand curved.
"Then Taylor Drive is on the left."
"Thank you." He put the car in gear, but she stopped him.
"You know, it would have been easier next time if, right when you left the gate, you took a left, then an immediate left, then—"
"Thank you," Will repeated, rolling the car along. His brain was going to explode if he talked to another person in this place. He kept the Porsche inching along, hoping he was going in the right direction. His phone rang, and he nearly wept with relief when he saw it was Faith. Carefully, he opened the broken phone and held it to his ear. "How was your doctor's appointment?" "Fine," she said. "Listen, I just talked to Tom Coldfield." "About meeting him? So did I." "Jake Berman's going to have to wait." Will felt his chest tighten. "I already talked to Jake Berman." She was quiet. Too quiet. "Faith, I'm sorry. I just thought it would be better if I—" Will didn't know how to finish the sentence. His grip on his cell phone slipped, bringing a crackling static onto the line. He waited for it to die down, then repeated, "I'm sorry." She took a painfully long time letting the axe fall. When she finally spoke, her tone was clipped, like her words were getting strangled in her throat. "I don't treat you differently because of your disability." She was wrong, actually, but he knew this was not the time to point that out. "Berman told me that Tom Coldfield was at the crime scene." She wasn't yelling at him, so he continued. "I guess Judith called him because Henry was having a heart attack. Tom followed them to the hospital in his car. The cops didn't show up until everyone was already gone." She seemed to be debating between screaming at him and being a cop. As usual, her cop side won out. "That's why Galloway was jerking us around. He was covering Rockdale County's ass." She moved on to the next problem. "And Tom Coldfield didn't tell us he was at the scene." Will paused for some more static. "I know." "He's early 30s, closer to my age. Pauline's brother was older, right?" Will wanted to talk to her about this in person rather than through his cracked phone. "Where are you?" "I'm right outside the Coldfields." "Good," he told her, surprised she had gotten there so fast. "I'm right around the corner. I'll be there in 2 minutes." Will ended the call and dropped the phone on the seat beside him. Another wire had slipped out between the clamshells. This one was red, which was not a good sign. He glanced at his rearview mirror. The skier was making her way toward him. She was coming up fast, and Will pushed the car up to 15 miles per hour so he could get away from her. The street signs were larger than normal, the letters a crisp white on black, which was a horrible combination for Will. He turned as soon as he could, not bothering to try to read the first letter on the sign. Faith's Mini would stand out like a beacon among the Cadillacs and Buicks the retired folk seemed to favor. Will got to the end of the street, but there was no Mini. He turned down the next street and nearly smacked into the skier. She made a motion with her hand, indicating he should roll down the window. He put on a pleasant smile. "Yes, ma'am." "Right there," she said, pointing to the cottage on the corner. This particular model had a lawn jockey outside, its white face freshly painted. 2 large cardboard boxes were by the mailbox, each labeled in black marker. "I guess you're not taking those back in this tiny car of yours." "No, ma'am." "Judith said her son was going to bring the truck later on today." She glanced up at the sky. "Better not be too late." "I'm sure it won't be long," Will told the skier. She didn't seem as keen to continue the conversation this time. She tossed him a wave as she continued her walk down the street. Will looked at the boxes in front of Judith and Henry Coldfield's house, reminded of the trash Jacqueline Zabel had set outside her mother's place. Though the cardboard boxes and black trash bags Jackie had put on the curb weren't meant to be trash. Charlie Reed had said he'd shoot off a Goodwill truck just before Will and Faith had arrived. Had he meant Goodwill specifically, or was he using the word as a catch-all, the way people always call plastic bandages Band-Aids and tissues Kleenexes? All along they had been looking for a physical link between the women, one thing that tied them all together. Had Will just stumbled onto it? The front door to the house opened, and Judith came out, walking cautiously as she tried to navigate her way down the 2 porch stairs with a large box in her hands. Will got out of the car and rushed over, catching the box before she dropped it. "Thank you," she told him. She was out of breath, her cheeks flushed. "I've been trying to get this stuff out all morning, and Henry's been no help whatsoever." She walked toward the curb. "Just put it here by the others. Tom's supposed to be by later to pick them up." Will set the box down on the ground. "How long have you volunteered at the shelter?" "Oh," she seemed to think about it as she walked back toward the house. "I don't know. Since we moved here. I guess that's a couple of years now. Goodness, how time flies." Faith and I saw a brochure the other day when we were at the shelter. It had a list of corporate sponsors on it. They want to get their money's worth. They're not being charitable because it's the right thing to do. It's public relations for them. There was a logo for a bank on the one we saw. Even now, he recalled the image of the 4-point deer at the bottom of the pamphlet. Oh yes, Buckhead Holdings. They donate the most money, which, between you and me, isn't nearly enough. Will felt a bead of sweat roll down his back. Olivia Tanner was the Community Relations Director for Buckhead Holdings. What about a law firm? He asked. Does anyone do pro bono work for the shelter? Judith opened the front door. There are a couple of firms who help out. We are a women's-only shelter, you know. Lots of the women need help filing divorce papers, getting restraining orders. Some of them are in trouble with the law. It's all very sad. Bandel and Brinks, Will asked, giving her the name of Anna Lindsay's law firm. Yes, Judith said, smiling. They help out quite a lot. Do you know a woman named Anna Lindsay? She shook her head as she went into the house. Was she staying in the shelter? I'm ashamed to say there are so many that I often don't have the time to speak to them individually. Will followed her inside, glancing around. The layout was exactly as he would have guessed from the street. There was a large living room that looked onto a screened porch and the lake. The kitchen was on the side of the house that had the garage, and the other side held the bedrooms. All the doors leading off the hallway were closed. The startling thing was that it looked as if an Easter egg had exploded inside the house. Decorations were everywhere. There were bunnies in pastel suits sitting on every available surface. Baskets with plastic eggs lying in silky green grass were scattered along the floor. Will said, Easter. Judith beamed. It's my second favorite time of the year. Will loosened his tie, feeling a sweat come all over him. Why is that? The resurrection, the rebirth of our Lord, the cleansing of all our sins. Forgiveness is a powerful, transformative gift. I see that at the shelter every day. Those poor, broken women, they want redemption. They don't realize it's not something that can just be given. Forgiveness has to be earned. Do they all earn it? Considering your job, I think you know the answer to that better than I do. Some women aren't worthy. She stopped smiling. People like to think that we've moved on from biblical times, but we still live in a society where women are cast out, don't we? Like trash? That's a bit harsh, but we all make our choices. Will felt more beads of sweat roll down his back. Have you always loved Easter? She straightened a bow tie on one of the rabbits. I suppose part of it's because Henry's work only gave him off Easter and Christmas. It was always such a special time for us. Don't you love being with family? He asked, Is Henry home? Not at the moment. She turned her watch around on her wrist. He's always late. He loses track of time so easily. We were supposed to go to the community center after Tom picked up the kids. Does Henry work at the shelter? Oh, no. She gave a small laugh as she walked into her kitchen. Henry's much too busy enjoying his retirement. Tom's good about helping out, though. He complains, but he's a good boy. Will remembered Tom had been trying to fix a lawnmower when they'd found him at the charity shop. Does he mostly work in the store? Lord, no, he hates working in the store. So what does he do? She picked up a sponge and wiped the counter. A little bit of everything. Like what? She stopped wiping. If a woman needs legal help, he tracks down one of the lawyers, or if one of the kids makes a spill, he grabs a mop. She smiled proudly. I told you, he's a good boy. Sounds like it. Will agreed. What else does he do? Oh, this and that. She paused, thinking it through. He coordinates the donations. He's very good on the phone. If it sounds like he's talking to someone who might give a bit more, he'll drive the truck over to pick up their stuff, and 9 times out of 10, he comes back with a nice check in addition. I think he likes getting out and talking to people. All he does at the airport is stare at blips on a screen all day. Would you like some iced water? Lemonade? No, thank you, he answered. What about Jacqueline Zabel? Have you heard her name before? That strikes a bell, but I'm not sure why. It's a very unusual name.
How about Pauline McGee, or maybe Pauline Seward? She smiled, putting her hand over her mouth. No. Will forced himself to slow things down. The first rule of interviewing was to be calm, because it was hard to spot whether or not someone else was tense when you were tense yourself. Judith had gone still when he'd asked the last question, so he repeated it. Pauline McGee or Pauline Seward? She shook her head. No. How often does Tom pick up donations? Judith's voice took on a falsely cheerful tone.
You know, I'm not sure. I've got my calendar in here somewhere. I usually mark the dates.
She opened one of the kitchen drawers and started to rummage around. She was visibly nervous, and he knew she had opened the drawer to give herself something to do other than look him in the eye. She chattered on, telling Will,
Tom is so good about giving his time.
He's very involved in the youth group at his church. The whole family volunteers at the soup kitchen once a month. Will didn't let her get sidetracked. Does he go out alone to pick up donations?
Unless there's a couch or something large.
She closed the drawer and opened another.
I have no idea where my calendar is. All those years I wanted my husband home with me, and now he drives me crazy putting things up where they don't belong.
Will glanced out the front window, wondering what was keeping Faith. The children are here. She opened another drawer.
Napping in the back.
Tom said he would meet me here. Why didn't he tell us he was at the crime scene where your car hit Anna Lindsay?
What?
She looked momentarily confused, but told him,
Well, I called Tom to come see Henry. I thought he was having a heart attack. That Tom would want to be there, that...
But Tom didn't tell us he was there, Will repeated. And neither did you.
It didn't.
She waved her hand, dismissing it.
He wanted to be with his father.
These women who were abducted were cautious women. They wouldn't open the door to just anybody. It would have to have been someone they trusted, somebody they knew was coming. She stopped looking for the calendar. Her face showed her thoughts as clear as a picture. She knew something was horribly wrong. Will asked, Where's your son, Mrs. Coldfield? Tears welled into her eyes.
Why are you asking all these questions about Tom?
He was supposed to meet me here. Her voice was almost a whisper.
He said he had to go home. I don't understand.
Will realized something then. Something Faith had said on the phone. She'd already talked to Tom Coldfield. The reason she wasn't here yet was because Tom had sent her to the wrong house. Will made his voice deadly serious. Mrs. Coldfield, I need to know where Tom is right now. She put her hand to her mouth, tears spilling from her eyes. There was a phone on the wall. Will snatched the receiver off the hook. He dialed in Faith's cell phone number, but his fingers didn't make it to the last digit. There was a searing pain in his back. The worst muscle spasm he'd ever had in his life. Will put his hand to his shoulder, his fingers feeling for a knot, but all he felt was cold, sharp metal. He looked down to find the bloody tip of what had to be a very large knife sticking out of his chest. Chapter 23. Faith sat outside Thomas Coldfield's house, her cell phone to her ear as she listened to Will's cell ring. He'd said he was 2 minutes away, but it was looking more like 10. The call went to voicemail. Will was probably lost, driving around in circles, looking for her car because he was too pig-headed to ask for help. If she was in a better mood, she'd go out and look for him. But she was scared of what she'd say to her partner if she had him alone. Every time she thought about Will lying to her, going to talk to Jake Berman behind her back, she had to squeeze the steering wheel to keep from punching a hole into the dashboard of the car. They couldn't go on like this. Not with Faith being a liability. If he thought she couldn't handle herself in the field, then there was no reason for them to be together anymore. She could put up with a lot of Will's crazy shit, but she had to have his trust or this would never work out. It wasn't as if Will didn't have his own liabilities. For instance,
not knowing the difference between something as freaking simple as left and right. Faith checked the time again. She would give Will another 5 minutes before going into the house. The doctor hadn't given her good news, though Faith had foolishly been expecting it. From the minute she'd made the appointment with Delia Wallace, her health had improved dramatically. She hadn't woken up in a cold sweat this morning. Her blood sugar was high, but not off the chart. Her mind felt sharp, focused. And then Delia Wallace had sent it all crashing down. Sarah had ordered some kind of test at the hospital that showed Faith's blood sugar pattern over the last few weeks. The results had not been good. Faith was going to have to meet with a dietitian. Dr. Wallace had told her she was going to have to plan out every meal, every snack, and every single moment of her life until she died, which she might do prematurely anyway, because her blood sugar was fluctuating so wildly that Dr. Wallace had told Faith the best thing she could do was take a couple of weeks off from work and focus on educating herself about the care and maintenance of a diabetic. She loved when doctors said things like that, as if taking 2 weeks off from work was something that could be achieved with a snap of a finger. Maybe Faith could go to Hawaii or Fiji. She could call up Oprah Winfrey and ask for the name of her personal chef. Fortunately, there was some good news with the bad. Faith had seen her baby. Well, not really seen it. The child was little more than a speck right now, but she had listened to his heartbeat, watched the ultrasound, and seen the gentle up and down of the tiny blob inside her. And even though Delia Wallace had insisted that it wasn't quite time for such things, Faith would have sworn that she saw a tiny little hand. Faith dialed in Will's cell phone number again. It rang over into voicemail almost immediately. She wondered if his phone had finally given up the ghost. Why he would not get a new one was beyond her. Maybe there was some sort of emotional attachment he had to the thing. Either way, he was holding her up. She opened the door and got out of the car. Tom Coldfield lived only 10 minutes from where his parents had met with their unfortunate accident. His house was in the middle of nowhere, the closest neighbor barely within walking distance. The home itself had that box-like feel of modern suburban architecture. Faith preferred her own ranch house, with its sloping floorboards and hideous fake paneling in the family room. Every year when she got her tax rebate, she told herself she was going to have something done to the paneling. And every year, Jeremy magically managed to need something around the same time as the check came in. Once, she thought she was going to get away clean, but the little scamp had broken his arm while trying to prove to his friends that he could jump his skateboard off the roof of the house and onto a mattress they had found in the woods. She put her hand to her stomach. That paneling was going to be up until she died. Faith fished in her purse for her ID as she walked to the front door. She was wearing heels and one of her nicest dresses, because for some reason this morning it had seemed important to look respectable in front of Delia Wallace. A silly affectation, since Faith had spent their entire time together in a thin paper gown. She turned around, looking out into the empty street. Still no sign of her partner. She didn't understand what was taking him so long. Tom had told Faith on the phone that he'd already given Will directions to his house. Even taking into account the left-right thing, Will was good at finding his way. He should be here by now. Regardless, he should definitely be answering his phone. Maybe Angie had called again. The way Faith was feeling toward Will right now, she hoped his wife was being every bit her pleasant self. Faith rang the doorbell and waited much too long for the door to be answered, considering she had been parked in the driveway for nearly a quarter of an hour. Hi. The woman who came to the door was thin and angular, but not pretty by any stretch. She gave Faith an awkward, forced smile. Her blonde hair was lank across her forehead, the dark roots growing in. She had that run-down look you get when you have small children. "I'm Special Agent Faith Mitchell," Faith said, holding up her badge. "Darla Coldfield." The woman's voice was one of those breathy whispers that implied delicacy. She picked at the collar of the purple blouse she was wearing. Faith could see the edge was worn, threads sticking up where she had picked open the seam. "Tom said he'd meet me here." "He should be home any second." The woman seemed to realize she was blocking the doorway. She stepped aside. "Won't you come in?" Faith walked into the foyer, which was lined with black and white tile. She saw that the tile went all the way through to the back of the house, into the kitchen and family room. Even the dining room and study on either side of the front door were tiled. Still, she made the perfunctory noise about the woman having a lovely home, her own footsteps echoing in her ears as they made their way to the family room. The furnishings were more masculine than Faith would have guessed. There was a brown leather couch and matching recliner. The rug on the floor was black, with not a speck of dirt or fuzz showing. There were no toys, which was odd, considering the Coldfields had 2 children. Maybe they weren't allowed in the room. She wondered where they spent their time. The part of the house she had seen was hot and uncomfortable, even though it was cool outside. Faith felt her skin on the edge of breaking into a sweat. Sun was streaming through the windows, yet every light in the place was on. Darla asked, "Would you like some tea?" Faith was looking at her watch again, wondering about Will. "Sure." "Sweet? Unsweet?" Faith's answer was not as automatic as it should have been. "Unsweet." "Have you lived here long?" 8 years. The place looked about as lived in as a vacant warehouse. "You have 2 kids?" "A boy and a girl." She smiled uncertainly. "Do you have a partner?" The question seemed strange given the conversation. "I have a son." She smiled, putting her hand to her mouth. She had probably picked up the gesture from her mother-in-law. "No, I meant someone you work with." "Yes." Faith looked at the family photos on the mantel. They were taken from the same series as the one Judith Coldfield had shown them at the shelter. "Maybe you could call Tom and see what's keeping him?" Her smile faltered. "Oh, no, I wouldn't want to bother him." "It's police business, so I really do need you to bother him." Darla pressed her lips together. Faith couldn't read her expression. She was almost completely blank. "My husband doesn't like to be rushed." "And I don't like to be kept waiting." Darla gave her that same weak smile from before. "I'll go get that tea for you." She started to leave, but Faith asked, "Do you mind if I use your bathroom?" Darla turned again, her hands clasped in front of her chest. Her face was still blank. "Down the hall on the right." "Thank you." Faith followed her directions, her heels clicking like a drum major's on the tile as she walked past a pantry and what must have been the door to the basement. She was getting a creepy feeling off of Darla Coldfield, but she couldn't quite figure out why. Maybe it was Faith's instinctive hatred of women who constantly deferred to their husbands. Inside the bathroom, she went straight to the sink, where she splashed cold water on her face. The lights were just as intense in the powder room, and Faith flipped down the switches, but nothing happened. She flipped them back up, and then back down again. Still, the lights stayed on. She looked up. The bulbs were probably 100 watts each. Faith blinked her eyes several times, thinking that looking directly into a burning light bulb was probably not the smartest thing she had ever done. She grabbed the doorknob to the linen closet to keep herself steady as she waited for the feeling to pass. Maybe she would wait in here for Will, instead of sitting on the sofa drinking tea with Darla Coldfield, straining to make small talk. The bathroom was nice, if sparsely furnished. The room was L-shaped, with the linen closet filling in the void between the top and bottom of the L. Faith guessed the laundry room was on the other side of the wall. She could hear the gentle rumble of a clothes dryer through the partition. Because Faith was a nosy person, she opened the closet door. There was a slow squeak from the hinges, and she stood there waiting for Darla Coldfield to come in and chastise her for being rude. When this did not happen, Faith looked inside. The space was deeper than she would have guessed, but the shelves were narrow, stacked with towels that were neatly folded and a set of sheets with race cars on them that probably belonged to the children. Where were the children? Maybe they were outside playing. Faith closed the closet door and looked out the small window. The backyard was empty. Not even a swing set or treehouse. Maybe the kids were taking naps in preparation for Grandma and Grandpa's visit. Faith had never let Jeremy sleep before her parents came to visit. She'd wanted her mother and father to run him ragged so that he was tired enough to sleep in the next morning. She groaned out a long sigh as she sat on the toilet beside the sink. She was still feeling lightheaded, probably from the heat, or maybe from her blood sugar. She had been on the high side at the doctor's office. She put her purse on her lap and dug around for her monitor. There had been a huge display for different blood glucose monitors on the wall in the doctor's office. Most of them were either cheap or free, because the real money came from the specialized strips they all used. Each manufacturer had a different one. So once you chose a monitor, you were locked in forever. Unless you dropped it on the bathroom floor and broke it. Shit, Faith mumbled, leaning down to pick up the monitor, which had slipped out of her hand and skittered over by the wall. She heard a faint, sonorous noise coming from the machine. Faith picked up the monitor, wondering what damage she had done. The readout on the machine was still at 0, waiting for a strip. She shook the device, holding it to her ear and listening for the sound again. She leaned down, trying to duplicate the motion that had caused the monitor to make the noise. The sound repeated, more like the kind of thing you would hear on a playground this time. Loud and frenzied. And not coming from the monitor. Could it be a cat? Some animal caught in the heating ducts. One Christmas, Jeremy's gerbil had been killed in the dryer, and Faith had sold the machine to a neighbor rather than deal with the carnage. But whatever this thing was, it was alive, and obviously intended to stay that way. She leaned down a third time, hovering near the heating grate at the base of the toilet. The noise was clearer this time, but still muffled. Faith got down on her knees, pressing her ear to the grate. She thought of all the animals that could make that sort of noise. It sounded almost like words. Help. It wasn't an animal. It was a woman calling for help. Faith's hand went into her purse, pulling out the velvet bag where she kept her Glock when she wasn't wearing it on her hip. Her hands were sweating. There was a sudden, loud knock on the door. Darla. "Are you okay in there, Agent Mitchell?" "I'm fine," Faith lied, trying to keep her voice normal. She found her cell phone, tried to ignore that her hands had started shaking. "Is Tom here yet?" "Yes." The woman went silent. Just that one word hanging in the air. "Darla?" There was no answer. "Darla, my partner is on the way. He's going to be here any minute." Faith's heart was pounding so hard that her chest hurt. "Darla?" There was another bang on the door, but this one was sharper. Faith dropped the phone and held the gun with both hands, ready to fire at whoever came into the bathroom. The Glock did not have a conventional safety. The only way it could be fired was if you pulled the trigger all the way back. Faith aimed at the center of the doorway, bracing herself to yank back the trigger as hard as she could. Nothing. No one came through the door. The knob was not turning. Quickly, she glanced down, looking for her cell phone. It was behind the toilet. She kept her gun trained on the door while she reached down for the phone, snatching it up. The door stayed closed. Faith's hands were sweating so badly that her fingers couldn't stay on the buttons. She hissed a curse as she dialed in the number wrong. She was trying again when she heard the closet door squeak open behind her. She spun around, her gun pointing straight at Darla's chest. Faith took in everything at once. The false door in the closet wall, the washing machine on the other side, the taser in Darla's hands. Faith lurched to the side, not bothering to aim as she pulled back on the trigger. The taser hook sailed past her, the thin metal wires shimmering in the bright light as the hooks bounced off the wall. Darla stood there, the spent taser in her hands. A chunk of sheetrock had been taken out over her left shoulder. "Don't move," Faith warned, keeping the gun trained on Darla's chest as she fumbled for the doorknob. "I mean it. Don't move." "I'm sorry," the woman whispered. "Where's Tom?" When she didn't answer, Faith screamed, "Where the fuck is Tom?" Darla would only shake her head. Faith threw open the door, still pointing the gun at Darla as she backed out of the room. "I'm so sorry," the woman repeated. 2 strong arms wrapped around Faith from behind. A man, his body hard, his strength palpable. It had to be Tom. He lifted her off the floor and, without thinking, Faith pulled the trigger again, firing the Glock into the ceiling. Darla was still standing in the closet, and Faith pulled the trigger with purpose this time, wanting to put a bullet in the woman that could be traced back to her gun. The Glock missed, and Darla ducked away, shutting the false door behind her. Faith fired again and again as Tom backed her out into the hallway, his hand clamped around Faith's wrist like a vice. The pain so sharp that she was sure her bones had snapped. She held onto the gun as long as she could. But she was no match for his strength. Dropping the weapon, she started kicking with all her might, reaching out to grab anything she could find, the edge of the door, the wall, the knob on the basement door. Every muscle in her body screamed from pain. "Fight," Tom grunted, his lips so close to Faith's ear that she felt like he was inside of her head. She could feel his body responding to the struggle, the pleasure he was deriving from her fear. Faith felt a surge of fury tighten her resolve. Anna Lindsay, Jacqueline Zabel, Pauline McGee, Olivia Tanner. She would not be another one of his victims. She would not end up at the morgue. She would not abandon her son. She would not lose her baby. She twisted around and scratched Tom's face, digging her fingernails into his eyes. She used every part of her body, her hands, her feet, her teeth, to fight him. She would not give in. She would kill him with her bare hands if she had to. "Let me out of here!" Someone screamed from the basement. The noise was a surprise. For a split second, Faith stopped struggling. Tom stopped too. The door shook. "Let me the fuck out!" Faith came to her senses. She started kicking again, flailing, doing everything she could to free herself. Tom held on, his powerful arms like a clamp around her body. Whoever was behind the basement door was beating it, trying to break it down. Faith opened up her mouth and screamed as loud as she could. "Help! Help me!" "Do it," Tom yelled. Darla stood at the end of the hallway, the reloaded taser in her hands. Faith saw her Glock at the woman's feet. "Do it!" Tom demanded, his voice barely audible over the banging behind the door. "Shoot her!" All Faith could think about was the child inside her, those tiny fingers, that delicate heartbeat pressing up and down against her baby's tissue-thin chest. She went completely limp, relaxing every muscle in her body. Tom hadn't been expecting her to give in, and he stumbled as he took on her full weight. They both dropped to the floor. Faith scrambled across the tile, reaching for the gun, but he yanked her back like a fish on a line. The door splintered open, shards of wood flying. A woman ran out, half fell into the hallway, screaming obscenities. Her hands were at her waist, her feet chained, but she moved with almost laser precision as she slammed her body into Tom's. Faith took advantage of the distraction and grabbed the Glock, twisting around, aiming at the bodies thrashing on the floor. "Fucker!" Pauline McGee screeched. She was kneeling on Tom's chest, leaning over him. Her hands were cuffed tight to a belt around her waist, but she had managed to wrap her fingers around his neck. "Die!" she screamed, blood spraying from her torn mouth. Her lips were shredded, her eyes wild. She was forcing all of her weight into Tom's neck. "Stop!" Faith managed, her breath rasping between her lips. She felt a deep, searing pain in her belly, like something had torn. Still, she kept her gun trained at Pauline's chest. There was at least half a magazine left in the Glock. She would use it if she had to. "Get off him!" Faith ordered. Tom bucked, hands clawing at Pauline. Pauline pressed harder, pivoting on her knees, putting her full weight into his neck. "Kill him!" Darla begged. She was curled into a ball by the bathroom door, the taser on the floor beside her. "Please, kill him!" "Stop!" Faith warned Pauline, willing her hand not to shake as she gripped the gun. "Let her do it," Darla pleaded. "Please let her do it." Faith groaned as she staggered to her feet. She put the gun to Pauline's head, made her voice as steady and strong as possible. "Stop right now or I will pull this fucking trigger, so help me God." Pauline looked up. Their eyes locked, and Faith willed every ounce of resolve into her face, even though all she wanted to do was fall to her knees and pray that the life inside of her was going to continue. "Let him go right now," Faith demanded. Pauline took her time obeying the order, as if she hoped that one more second of pressure would do the trick. She sat back on the floor, her hands still clenched. Tom rolled over, coughing so hard that his entire body spasmed from the effort. "Call an ambulance," Faith said, though no one seemed to be moving. Her mind raced, her vision kept blurring. She had to call Amanda. She had to find Will. Where was he? Why wasn't he here? "What's wrong with you?" Pauline asked, giving Faith a nasty look. Faith's head was spinning. She sagged against the wall, trying not to pass out. She felt something wet between her legs. There was another twinge in her belly, almost like a contraction. "Call an ambulance," she repeated. "Trash," Tom Coldfield muttered. "You're all nothing but trash." "Shut up," Pauline hissed. Tom rasped, "Put now this woman out from me, and bolt the door after her." "Shut up," Pauline repeated through clenched teeth. A guttural sound came from Tom's throat. He was laughing. "Oh, Absalom, I am risen." Pauline struggled to get to her knees. "You're going straight to hell, you sick bastard." "Don't," Faith warned, raising the gun again. "Get a phone." She glanced over her shoulder at Darla. "Get my phone out of the bathroom." Faith snapped her head around as Pauline leaned over Tom. "Don't," Faith repeated. Pauline smiled a grotesque, jack-o'-lantern sneer down at Tom Coldfield. Instead of wrapping her hands around his throat again, she spit in his face. "Georgia's a death penalty state, motherfucker. Why else do you think I moved here?" "Wait," Faith said, bewildered. "You know him?" Raw hatred flashed in the woman's eyes. "Of course I know him, you stupid bitch. He's my brother." Chapter 24. Will lay on his side on Judith Coldfield's kitchen floor, watching Judith sob into her hands. His nose was itching, which was a funny thing to bother him, considering the fact that he had a kitchen knife sticking out of his back. At least, he thought it was a kitchen knife. Every time he tried to turn his head to look, the pain got so bad that he felt himself start to pass out. He wasn't bleeding badly. The real threat came from the knife moving, shifting away from whatever vessel or artery it was damming, and causing the blood to start flowing in earnest. Just thinking about the mechanics of the thing, the metal blade pressing between muscle and sinew, made his head swim. Sweat drenched his body, and he was starting to get chills. Oddly, holding up his neck was the hardest part. The muscles were so tense that his head throbbed with every heartbeat. If he let go for even a second, the pain in his shoulder brought the taste of vomit into his mouth. Will had never realized how many parts of his body were connected to his shoulder. "He's a good boy," Judith told Will, her voice muffled by her hands. "You don't know how good he is. Tell me why you think he's good." The request startled her. She finally looked up at him, seemed to realize he was in danger of eventually dying. "Are you in pain?" "I'm hurting pretty badly," he admitted. "I need to call my partner. I need to know if she's okay." "Tom would never hurt her." The fact that she felt compelled to make that statement sent an icy dread through Will. Faith was a good cop. She could take care of herself, except the times when she couldn't. She had passed out a few days ago, just dropped to the pavement in the parking garage at the courthouse. What if she passed out again? What if she passed out, and when she finally came to, she opened her eyes to see another cave, another torture chamber excavated by Tom Coldfield? Judith wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't know what to do. Will didn't think she was looking for suggestions. Pauline Seward left Ann Arbor, Michigan, 20 years ago. She was 17 years old. Judith looked away. He took a calculated guess. The missing persons report filed on her said that she left home because her brother was abusing her. That's not true. Pauline was she made that up. I've read the report. He lied. I saw what he did to her. He didn't do anything, Judith insisted. Pauline did those things to herself. She hurt herself. She hurt herself. She made up stories. From the moment she was born, she was always making trouble. Will should have guessed. Pauline's your daughter. Judith nodded, obviously disgusted by the fact. What kind of trouble did she get into? She wouldn't eat, Judith told him. She starved herself. We took her to doctor after doctor. We spent every dime we had trying to get help for her, and she repaid us by going to the police and telling them awful stories about Tom. Just awful, awful things. That he hurt her. She hesitated, then gave the slightest of nods. Tom has always had a sweet nature. Pauline was just too... She shook her head, unable to find words. She made things up about him. Awful things. I knew they couldn't be true. Judith kept coming back to the same point. Even when she was a small child, she told lies. She was always looking for ways to hurt people. To hurt Tom. His name isn't really Tom, is it? She was looking somewhere over his shoulder, probably at the handle of the knife. Tom is his middle name. His first is... Matthias? He guessed. She nodded again, and for just a moment, Will let himself think about Sarah Linton. She had been joking at the time, but she had also been right. Find the guy named Matthias, and you find your killer. After Judas's betrayal, the apostles had to decide who would help them tell the story of the resurrection of Jesus. She finally met his gaze. They chose Matthias. He was a holy man, a true disciple to our Lord. Will blinked to get the sweat out of his eyes. He told Judith, "Every woman who is missing or dead has a connection to your shelter. Jackie donated her mother's things. Olivia Tanner's bank sponsored your community outreach. Anna Lindsay's law firm did pro bono work. Tom must have met them all there." You don't know that. Then tell me another connection. Judith's eyes scanned his back and forth, and he could read the desperation in her face. Pauline, she suggested. She might be. Pauline is missing, Mrs. Coldfield. She was abducted from a parking lot 2 days ago. Her 6-year-old son was left in the car. She has a child? Judith's mouth opened in shock. Pauline has a baby. Felix, your grandson. She put her hand to her chest. The doctor said she wouldn't. I don't understand. How could she have a baby? They said she'd never be able to carry. She kept shaking her head in disbelief. Did your daughter have an eating disorder? We tried to get help for her, but in the end... Judith shook her head, as if it was all useless. Tom teased her about her weight, but all little brothers tease their older sisters. He never meant her any harm. He never meant... She stopped, holding back a strangled sob. There was a crack in her facade as she let herself consider the possibility that her son might be the monster Will had described. Just as quickly she recovered, shaking her head. No, I don't believe you. Tom would never hurt anyone. Will's body started to shiver. He still wasn't losing much blood, but his mind wasn't capable of ignoring the pain for longer than a minute at a time. His head would drop, or he would flick sweat out of his eye, and it would flare up like hellfire. The darkness kept calling to him, the sweet relief of letting go. He let his eyes close for a few seconds, then a few more. Will jerked himself awake, groaning at the searing pain. Judith said, "You need help. I should get you help." She made no move to do this. The phone started to ring again, and she simply stared at the receiver on the wall. "Tell me about the cave." "I don't know anything about that." "Did your son like to dig holes?" "My son likes to go to church. He loves his family. He loves helping people." "Tell me about the number 11. "What about it?" "Tom seems drawn to it. Is it because of his name?" "He just likes it." "Judas betrayed Jesus. There were 11 apostles until Matthias came along." "I know my Bible stories." "Did Pauline betray you? Were you incomplete until your son came along?" "This means nothing to me." "Tom's obsessed with the number 11, Will told her. "He took Anna Lindsay's 11th rib. He shoved 11 trash bags up inside her womb." "Stop!" she shouted. "I don't want to hear any more." "He electrocuted them. He tortured and raped them." She screeched. "He was trying to save them!" The words echoed around the tiny room like a pinball striking metal. Judith covered her mouth with her hand, horrified. Will said, "You knew." "I didn't know anything." "You must have seen it on the news. Some of the women's names were released. You had to recognize them from your work at the shelter. You saw Anna Lindsay in the road after Henry hit her with a car. You called Tom to take care of her, but there were too many people around." "No." "Judith, you know." "I know my son," she insisted. "If he was with those women, it was only because he was trying to help them." "Judith." She stood up, and Will could tell she was angry. "I'm not going to listen to you lie about him. I nursed him when he was a baby. I held him." She cradled her arms. "I held him to my chest and promised him that I would protect him." "You didn't do that with Pauline, too?" Her face became emotionless. "If Tom doesn't come, I'm going to have to take care of you myself." She took a knife out of the butcher block. "I don't care if I go to prison for the rest of my life. I will not let you destroy my son." "You sure you can do that? Stabbing someone in the back isn't the same as stabbing them to their face." "I'm not going to let you hurt him." She held the knife awkwardly, gripped in both hands. "I won't let you." "Put the knife down." "What makes you think you can tell me what to do?" "My boss is behind you with a gun pointed at your head." She gasped, the sound catching in her throat when she whirled around and saw Amanda standing on the other side of the window. Without warning, Judith raised the knife and lunged toward Will. The window exploded. Judith fell to the floor in front of him, the knife still gripped in her hand. A perfect circle of blood seeped into the back of her shirt. He heard a door break open. People ran in, heavy shoes on the floor, orders being barked. Will couldn't take it anymore. He dropped his head, and the pain shot through to his core. Amanda's high heel swam into his vision. She knelt down in front of him. Her mouth was moving, but Will couldn't hear what she was saying. He wanted to ask about Faith, about her baby, but it was too easy to surrender to the darkness. 3 days later. Chapter 25. Pauline McGee was hard to look at, even as she held her child in her lap. Her mouth had been ripped to shreds by the metal wire she'd chewed through, so she mumbled as she tried to speak, her lips tightly held together. Tiny sutures held the skin in place, like something out of Frankenstein. And yet, she was hard to feel any sympathy for, perhaps because she kept referring to Faith as bitch, more than any man ever had.
"Bitch," she said now, "I don't know what I can tell you. I haven't seen my family in 20 years.
Will shifted in his chair beside Faith. His arm was in a sling tight to his chest, and he was in visible pain. But he had insisted on coming in for the interview. Faith couldn't blame him for wanting answers. Unfortunately, it was fast becoming obvious that they weren't going to get them from Pauline. "Tom has lived in 16 different cities over the last 30 years, Will told her. "We've found cases in 12 of them, women who were abducted and never returned. They were always in pairs, 2 women at a time."
"I know what a fucking pair is."
Will opened his mouth to speak, but Faith reached under the table, pressing his knee. Their usual tactics weren't working. Pauline McGee was a survivor, willing to step over anything or anyone to save her own skin. She had kicked Olivia Tanner into unconsciousness in order to make sure she was the first one to escape the basement. She would have strangled her own brother to death if Faith hadn't stopped her. She wasn't someone who could be reached through empathy. Faith took a gamble. "Pauline, stop the bullshit. You know you can leave this room at any time. You're staying for a reason." The injured woman looked down at Felix, stroking his hair. For just an instant, Pauline McGee seemed almost human. Something about the child transformed her so that Faith suddenly understood the hard outer shell was a defense against the world that only Felix could penetrate. The boy had fallen asleep in her arms as soon as his mother sat down at the conference table. His thumb kept going to his mouth, and Pauline moved it away a few times before giving in. Faith could understand why she wouldn't want to let her son out of sight, but this was hardly the kind of thing you'd want to bring a kid to. Pauline asked, "Were you really going to shoot me?" "What?" Faith asked, even though she knew exactly what the woman meant. "In the hall," she said.
"I would have killed him. I wanted to kill him."
"I'm a police officer," Faith answered. "It's my job to protect life."
"That life?" Pauline asked, incredulous. "You know what that bastard did."
She lifted her chin toward Will.
"Listen to your partner. My brother killed at least 24 women. Do you really think he deserves a trial?"
She pressed her lips to the top of Felix's head.
"You should have let me kill him. Put him down like a fucking dog."
Faith didn't answer, mostly because there was nothing to say. Tom Coldfield was not talking. He wasn't bragging about his crimes or offering to tell where the bodies were buried in exchange for his life. He was resolved to go to prison, probably death row. All he had asked for was bread and water and his Bible, a book that had so many scribbled notations in the margins that the words were barely legible. Still, Faith had tossed and turned in bed over the last few nights, reliving those few seconds in the hallway. Sometimes she let Pauline kill her brother. Sometimes she ended up having to shoot the woman. None of the scenarios sat well with her, and she had resigned herself to knowing that these emotions were the type that only time could heal. The process of moving on was helped by the fact that the case was no longer Faith and Will's responsibility. Because Matthias Thomas Coldfield's crimes had crossed state lines, he was the FBI's problem now. Faith was only allowed to interview Pauline because they thought the women shared a bond. They were dead wrong. Or maybe not. Pauline asked, "How far along are you?" 10 weeks, Faith answered. She had been at the edge of insanity when the paramedics arrived at Tom Coldfield's house. All she could think about was her baby, whether or not it was still safe. Even when the heartbeat had bleated through the fetal monitor, Faith had kept sobbing, begging the EMTs to take her to the hospital. She'd been sure they were all wrong, that something horrible had happened. Oddly, the only person who could convince her otherwise had been Sarah Linton. On the plus side, Her whole family knew she was pregnant now, thanks to the Grady nurses referring to Faith as that hysterical pregnant cop her entire stay in the ER. Pauline stroked back Felix's hair.
I got so fat with him. It was disgusting.
It's hard, Faith admitted. It's worth it, though.
I guess.
She brushed her torn lips across her son's head.
He's the only thing good about me.
Faith had often said the same thing about Jeremy, but now, facing Pauline McGee, she saw how lucky she was. Faith had her mother, who loved her despite all Faith's faults. She had Zeke, even though he had moved to Germany to get away from her. She had Will, and for better or worse, she had Amanda. Pauline had no one, just a small boy who desperately needed her. Pauline said,
When I had Felix, it just made me think about her, Judith. How could she hate me so much?
She looked up at Faith, expecting an answer. Faith said,
I don't know. I can't imagine how anyone could hate their own child. Any child, for that matter. Well, some kids just suck. But your own kid.
Pauline went quiet for such a long time that Faith wondered if they were back to square one again. Will spoke.
We need to know why all of this happened, Pauline. I need to know.
She was staring back out the window, her son held close to her heart. She spoke so quietly that Faith had to strain to hear her.
My uncle raped me.
Faith and Will were both silent, giving the woman space. Pauline confided,
I was 3 years old, then 4, then coming up on 5. I finally told my grandmother what was happening. I thought the bitch would save me. But she turned it around like I was some devil child.
Her lips twisted into a bitter sneer.
My mother believed them, not me. She chose their side, like always.
What happened?
We moved away. We always moved when things got bad. Dad put in for a transfer at work. We sold the house, and then we started all over again. Different town, different school, same fucking situation.
Will asked,
When did it get bad with Tom?
I was 15. Pauline shrugged again. I had this friend, Alexandra McGee. That's where I got my name when I changed it. We lived in Oregon a couple of years before we moved to Ann Arbor. That's when it really started with Tom, when everything got bad. Her tone had turned to a dull narrative, as if she was giving a second-hand account of something mundane, instead of revealing the most horrible moments of her life.
He was obsessed with me. Like, in love with me. He followed me around, and he would smell my clothes and try to touch my hair, and...
Faith tried to hide her revulsion, but her stomach clenched at the image the other woman's words conjured. Pauline said,
Suddenly Alex stopped coming over. We were best friends. I wanted to know if I'd said something or done something.
Her voice trailed off.
Tom was hurting her. I don't know how. At least, I didn't know how in the beginning. I found out soon enough.
What happened? She was writing this sentence everywhere, over and over again. On her books, on the soles of her shoes, the back of her hand.
I will not deny myself, Will guessed.
Pauline nodded.
It was this exercise one of the doctors at the hospital gave me. I was supposed to write the sentence, convince myself not to binge and purge, like writing a fucking sentence a zillion times would make it all go away.
Did you know Tom was making Alex write the sentence?
She looked like me, Pauline admitted. That's why he liked her so much. She was like a substitution for me. Same color hair, same height. About the same weight, but she looked fatter than me.
The same qualities that had drawn Tom to all the recent victims. Each woman resembled his sister. Pauline told them,
I asked him about it. Why he was making her write the sentence. I mean, I was pissed, right? And I yelled at him, and
He just hit me. Not like a slap, but with his fist. And when I fell down, he started beating me. Faith asked, "What happened next?" Pauline stared blankly out the window, as if she was alone in the room. Alex and I were in the woods. We'd go out there to smoke after school. The day that Tom beat me, I met her out there. At first, she wouldn't say anything, but then she just broke down. She finally told me that Tom had been taking her into the basement of our house and doing things to her. Bad things. She closed her eyes. Alex took it, because Tom said if she didn't, then he would start doing it to me. She was protecting me. She opened her eyes, staring at Faith with startling intensity. Alex and I were talking about what to do. I told her it was useless telling my parents, but nothing would happen. So we decided to go to the police. There was this cop I knew, only I guess Tom followed us out to the woods. He was always watching us. He had this baby monitor he hid in my room. He'd listen to us, and she shrugged, and Faith could very easily guess what Tom had been doing while he listened to his sister and her friend. Pauline continued. Anyway, Tom found us in the woods. He hit me in the back of the head with a rock. I don't know what he did to Alex. I didn't see her for a while. I think he was working on her, trying to break her. That was the hardest part. Was she dead? Was he beating her? Torturing her? Or maybe he'd let her go and she was keeping quiet because she was scared of him. She swallowed. But it wasn't that. What was it? He was keeping her in the basement again, priming her for the really bad stuff. No one hurt her down there? Pauline shook her head. Dad was gone, and Mom. She shook her head again. Faith was convinced they would never really know what Judith Coldfield knew about her son's sadistic ways. Pauline said, I don't know how long it lasted, but eventually, Alex ended up in the same place as me. Where was that? In the ground, she said. It was dark. We were blindfolded. He put cotton in our ears, but we could still hear each other. We were tied up. Still, we knew we were underground. There's a taste, right? Kind of like a wet, dirty taste you get in your mouth. He had dug a cave. It must have taken him weeks. He always liked to plan everything, to control every last detail. Was Tom with you all the time after that? Not at first. I guess he was still working on his alibi. He just left us there for a few days. Tied up so we couldn't move, couldn't see, could barely hear anything. We screamed at first, but she shook her head as if she could shake away the memory. He brought us water, but not food. I guess a week went by. I was okay. I'd gone longer than that without eating. But Alex, she broke. She kept crying all the time, begging me to do something to help her. Then Tom would come, and I'd beg him to shut her up to make it so I didn't have to hear it. She went silent again, lost in her memories. And then one day, something changed. He started in on us. What did he do? At first he just talked. He was all into biblical stuff my mom put into his head about him being a replacement for Judas who betrayed Jesus. She was always saying how I had betrayed her, how she had carried me to be a good kid, but I had turned out rotten. Made her family hate her with my lies. Faith quoted the last sentence she had heard Tom Coldfield utter. "O Absalom, I am risen." Pauline shivered, as if the words cut through her. It's from the Bible. AnAn raped his own sister, and once he was finished with her, he cast her out for being a whore. Her torn lips twisted into an approximation of a smile. Absalom was AnAn's brother. He killed him for raping their sister. She gave a harsh laugh. Too bad I didn't have another brother. Was Tom always obsessed with religion? Not a regular religion. Not normal. He twisted the Bible to suit whatever he wanted to do. That's why he was keeping me and Alex underground, so that we would have a chance to be reborn like Jesus. She looked up at Faith. Crazy shit, right? He'd go on and on for hours, telling us how bad we were, talking about how he was going to redeem us. He'd touch me sometimes, but I couldn't see. She shuddered again, her whole body shaking from the movement. Felix stirred, and she soothed him back to sleep. Faith felt her heart thumping in her chest. She could remember her own struggle with Tom, the feel of his hot breath in her ear when he told her, "Fight." Will asked, "What did Tom do when he stopped talking to you and Alex?" "What do you think he did?" she asked sarcastically. "He didn't know what he was doing, but he knew he liked it when he hurt us." She swallowed, her eyes tearing up. It was our first time, both of us. We were only 15. Girls didn't sleep around a lot back then. We weren't angels or anything, but we weren't sluts either. Did he do anything else? He starved us. Not like what he did to the other women, but bad enough. The trash bags. She gave a single, tight nod. We were trash to him. Nothing but trash. Tom had said as much in the hallway. No one missed you or Alex when Tom had you in the cave. They thought we'd run away. Girls do that, right? They just run away from home. And if the parents are there, to say that the girls are bad, that they lie all the time and can't be trusted, then it's no big deal, right? She didn't let them answer. I bet Tom got a hard-on line to the cops, telling them he had no idea where we'd gone. How old was Tom when this happened? 3 years younger than me. 12, Will said. No, Pauline corrected. He hadn't had his birthday yet. He was only 11 when it happened. He turned 12 a month later. Mom had a party. The little freak was out on bail, and she threw him a birthday party. How did you get out of the cave? He let us go. He said he was going to kill us if we told anybody, but Alex told her parents anyway, and they believed her. She snorted a laugh. Fuck me if they didn't believe her. What happened to Tom? He was arrested. The cops called, and Mom took him down to the station. They didn't come get him. They didn't arrest him. They just called us on the phone and said to bring him in. She paused, collecting herself. Tom had a psychiatric evaluation. There was all this talk about sending him to adult prison, but he was only a kid, and the shrinks were screaming about how he needed help. Tom could look younger when he wanted, much younger than he actually was. Bewildered, like he didn't understand why people were saying all these bad things about him. What did the courts decide to do? He was diagnosed with something. I don't know, psychopath probably. We have his Air Force records. Did you know he served? Pauline shook her head, and Faith told her. 6 years. He was discharged in lieu of court-martial. What does that mean? Reading between the lines, I'd guess that the Air Force didn't want, or know how, to treat his disorder, so they offered him an honorable discharge and he took it. Tom Coldfield's military records were written in the sort of departmental code only a seasoned vet could decipher. As a doctor, Faith's brother, Zeke, had recognized all the clues. The nail in the coffin was the fact that Tom had never been called back up to serve in Iraq, even at the height of the war, when enlistment standards had dropped to almost non-existent. Will asked, "What happened to Tom in Oregon?" Pauline answered in a measured tone. He was supposed to go to the state hospital, but Mom talked to the judge, said we had family back east, and could we take him back and put him in a hospital there so he could be close to the people who cared about him. The judge said okay. I guess they were glad to get rid of us. Sort of like with the Air Force, huh? Out of sight, out of mind. Did your mother get him treatment? Hell no, she laughed. My mother did the same fucking thing all over again. She said Alex and I were lying, that we had run away and gotten hurt by a stranger, and we were trying to pin it on Tom because we hated him and we wanted people to feel sorry for us. Faith felt a sickness in the pit of her stomach, wondering how a mother could be so blind to her child's suffering. Will asked, "Is that when you changed your names to Coldfield?" We changed them to Seward after what happened to Tom. It wasn't easy. There were bank accounts, all sorts of documents to file to make it legal. My dad started asking questions. He wasn't happy because he actually had to do something, you know. Go down to the courthouse, get copies of birth certificates, fill out forms. They were in the middle of changing everything over to Seward when I ran away. I guess when they left Michigan, they changed it back to Coldfield. It's not like Oregon was following up on Tom. As far as they were concerned, his case was closed. Did you ever hear from Alex McGee? She killed herself. Pauline's voice was so cold, it sent a chill down Faith's spine. I guess she couldn't take it. Some women are like that. Will asked, "You're sure your father didn't know what was going on?" "He didn't want to know," Pauline answered. But there was no way of confirming this. Henry Coldfield had suffered a massive coronary upon hearing what had happened to his wife and son. He'd died en route to the hospital. Will kept pressing. "Your father never noticed. He traveled all the time. He was gone for weeks, sometimes as much as a whole month. And even when he was home, he was never really home. He was flying his plane, or off hunting, or playing golf, or just doing whatever the hell he wanted to do." Pauline's tone got angrier with every word. They had this kind of bargain, you know. She kept the house running, didn't ask him to help with anything, and he got to do whatever he wanted so long as he handed over his paycheck and didn't ask any questions. Nice life, huh? Did your father ever hurt you? No, he was never there to hurt me. We saw him at Christmas and Easter. That was about it. Why Easter? I don't know. It was always special to my mother. She would dye eggs and hang up streamers and stuff. She would tell Tom the story of his birth, how he was special, how she had wanted a son so badly, how he'd made her life complete. Is that why you chose to run away on Easter? I ran away because Tom was digging another hole in the backyard. Faith gave her a moment to collect her thoughts. This was in Ann Arbor? Pauline nodded, a faraway look in her eyes. I didn't recognize him, you know. When he abducted you? It happened so fast. I was so damn happy to see Felix, I thought I'd lost him. And then my brain started to make the connection that it was Tom standing there, but it was too late by then. You recognized him. I felt him. I can't describe it. I just knew with every part of my body that it was him. She closed her eyes for a few seconds. When I came to in the basement, I could still feel him. I don't know what he did to me while I was passed out. I don't know what he did. Faith suppressed a shudder at the thought. How did he find you? I think he always knew where I was. He's good at tracking people down, watching them, figuring out their habits. I guess I didn't make it too hard, using Alex's name like I did. She gave a humorless laugh. He called me at work about 1.5 years ago. Can you believe that? What are the odds that I'd take a call like that and it would be Tom on the other end? Did you know it was him on the phone? Fuck no, I would have grabbed Felix and run. What did he want when he called? I told you it was a cold call. She shook her head, disbelieving. He told me about the shelter, that they would take donations and give blank receipts. We've got all these rich clients and they give away their furniture to charity for the tax write-off. It makes them feel better about ditching a $50,000 living room set and buying an $80,000 one. Faith couldn't even comprehend the numbers. So, you decided to refer your clients to the shelter. I was pissed at Goodwill. They give you a time frame like between 10 and noon. Who can wait for that? My clients are millionaires. They can't sit around all morning waiting for some homeless dude to show up. Tom said the shelter would make an exact appointment and be there on time. And they always were. They were friendly and clean, which, trust me, is saying a lot. I told everybody to use them. She realized what she had said. I told everybody, including the women on your internet board. She kept silent. Faith told her what they had found out over the last few days. Anna Lindsay's firm started giving the shelter legal advice 6 months ago. Olivia Tanner's bank became a major donor last year. Jackie Zabel called the shelter to pick up things from her mother's house. They all heard about the shelter somewhere. I didn't know. They still hadn't managed to break into the chat room. The site was too sophisticated, and cracking the passwords no longer had a priority for the FBI, since their guy was already sitting in jail. Faith needed the confirmation, though. She had to hear it from Pauline. You posted about the shelter, didn't you? Pauline still did not answer. Tell me, Faith said, and for some reason, the request worked. Yeah, I posted it. Faith hadn't realized that she had been holding her breath. She let it out in a slow stream. How did Tom know they all had eating disorders? Pauline looked up. Some of her color seeped back into her cheeks. How did you know? Faith thought about the question. They knew because they had investigated the women's lives just as methodically as Tom Coldfield had. He'd followed them around, spied on their most intimate moments, and none of them had known he was doing it. Pauline asked, Is the other woman all right? The one I was with? Yes. Olivia Tanner was well enough to refuse to talk to the police. She's a tough bitch. So are you, Faith told her. It might help to talk to her. I don't need help. Faith didn't bother to argue. Pauline said, I knew Tom would find me eventually. I kept training myself, making sure I could go without food, making sure I could last. She explained, when it was me and Alex, he would hurt whoever screamed the loudest, whoever broke first. I made sure it wasn't me. That's how I helped myself. Will asked, Your father never asked why your mother wanted to change your names and move? She told him it was to give Tom a fresh start. Give us all a fresh start. She gave a humorless laugh, directing her words toward Faith. It's always about the boys, isn't it? Mothers and their sons. Fuck the daughters. It's the sons they really love. Faith put her hand to her stomach. The gesture had become second nature over the last few days. All along, she had been thinking that the child inside of her was a boy, another Jeremy who would draw pictures and sing to her, another toddler who would puff out his chest when he told his friends that his mom was a cop, another young man who was respectful of women, another adult who knew from his single mother how hard it was to be the fairer sex. Now Faith prayed that she would have a daughter. Every woman they had met on this case had found a way to hate herself long before Tom Coldfield had gotten hold of her. They all were used to depriving their bodies of everything from nourishment to warmth to something as vital as love. Faith wanted to show her own child a different path. She wanted a girl she could raise who might have a chance of loving herself. She wanted to see that girl grow into a strong woman who knew her value in the world. And she never wanted either of her children to meet someone as bitter and damaged as Pauline McGee. Will told Pauline, Judith's in the hospital. The bullet just missed her heart. The woman's nostrils flared. Tears came into her eyes, and Faith wondered if there was still a part of her, no matter how small, that wanted some kind of bond with her mother. Faith offered, I can take you to see Judith if you want. She snorted a laugh, angrily wiping away her tears. Bitch, don't even. She was never there for me. I'm sure as shit not going to be there for her. She shifted her son on her shoulder. I need to get him home. Will tried. If you could just what? He didn't have an answer for her. Pauline stood up and walked to the door, trying to hold Felix as she reached for the knob. Faith told her, the FBI will probably be getting in touch with you. The FBI can kiss my ass. She managed to get the door open. And so can you. Faith watched her walk down the hallway, shifting Felix as she turned toward the elevators. God, she said softly. It's hard to feel sorry for her. You did the right thing, Will told her. Faith saw herself in Tom Coldfield's hallway again, her gun pointed at Pauline's head, Tom bucking on the floor. They weren't trained to wing suspects. They were trained to fire a rapid bullet spread straight over the center of the chest. Unless you were Amanda Wagner, Then you squeezed off a single shot that did enough damage to take them down, but not take their life. Will asked, "If you had to do it again, would you let Pauline kill Tom?" "I don't know," Faith confessed. "I was operating on autopilot. I just did what I was trained to do." Considering what Pauline's been through, Will began, then stopped himself. "She's not very nice. She's a cold-blooded bitch. I'm surprised I haven't fallen in love with her." Faith laughed. She had seen Angie at the hospital when they brought Will out of surgery. "How is Mrs. Trent doing?" "She's making sure my life insurance policies are paid up." He took out his phone. "I told her I'd be back by 3. Faith didn't make a comment about the new phone or the wary look on his face. She supposed Angie Pulaski was back in Will's life now. Faith would just have to get used to her, the same way you tolerated an annoying sister-in-law or the boss's whorishly obnoxious daughter. He pushed back his chair. "I guess I should go." "You want me to drive you home?" "I'll walk." He only lived a few blocks over, but he'd been in surgery less than 72 hours ago. Faith opened her mouth to protest, but Will stopped her. "You're a good cop, Faith, and I'm glad you're my partner." There were few things he could have said that would have stunned her more. "Really?" He leaned down and kissed the top of her head. Before she could respond, he told her, "If you ever see Angie on top of me like that, don't give her a warning, all right? Just pull the trigger." Epilogue. Sarah stood back as they rolled her patient out of the trauma room. The man had been in a head-on collision with the motorcyclist who thought red lights were only for cars. The cyclist was dead, but the man had a good chance thanks to the fact that he was wearing his seatbelt. Sarah was constantly amazed at the number of people she saw in the Grady ER who believed seatbelts were unnecessary. She had seen almost as many in the morgue during her years as coroner for Grant County. Mary came into the room to clean up the mess for the next patient. "Good save," she said. Sarah felt herself smiling. Grady saw only the worst of the worst. She didn't hear that often enough. "How's that hysterical pregnant cop doing? Mitchell?" "Faith," Sarah supplied. "Good, I guess." She hadn't talked to Faith since the woman had been airlifted to the emergency room 2 weeks ago. Every time Sarah thought to pick up the phone to check on her, something stopped her from making the call. For her part, Faith hadn't called either. She was probably embarrassed that Sarah had seen her at such a low moment. For a woman who hadn't been sure whether or not she was going to keep her baby, Faith Mitchell had sobbed like a child when she thought she'd lost it. Mary asked, "Isn't your shift over?" Sarah glanced at the clock. Her shift had ended 20 minutes ago. "You need help?" She indicated various detritus she'd thrown on the floor minutes earlier as she'd worked to save her patient's life. "Go on," Mary told her. "You've been here all night." "So have you," Sarah reminded her, but she didn't have to be told twice to leave. Sarah walked down the hall toward the doctor's lounge, stepping aside as gurneys whizzed by. Patients were stacked up like sardines again, and she ducked under the counter at the nurse's station to take a shortcut away from them. CNN was on the television over the desk. She saw that the Tom Coldfield case was still in the news. As big as the story was, Sarah found it remarkable that more people had not come forward to tell their version of events. She hadn't expected Anna Lindsay to exploit herself for money, but the fact that the other 2 surviving women were equally as tight-lipped was surprising in this age of instant movie deals and television exclusives. Sarah had gleaned from the news reports that there was more to the story than GBI was letting on, but she was hard-pressed to find anyone who was willing to share the truth. She certainly could not be faulted for trying. Faith had been incapable of communicating anything when she'd been brought into the ER. But Will Trent had been kept overnight for observation. The kitchen knife had missed all the major arteries, but his tendons were another story. He was looking at months of physical therapy before he got back his full range of motion. Despite this, Sarah had gone into his room the next morning with a blatant intent of pumping him for information. He'd been different with her, and kept pulling up the bedsheet, finally tucking it under his chin in an oddly chaste manner, as if Sarah had never seen a man's chest before. Will's wife had shown up a few minutes later, and Sarah had realized instantly that the awkward moment she'd had with Will Trent on her couch was purely a figment of her imagination. Angie Trent was striking and sexy in that dangerous-looking way that drives men to extremes. Standing beside her, Sarah had felt slightly less interesting than the hospital wallpaper. She had made her excuses and left as quickly as politeness would allow. Men who liked women like Angie Trent did not like women like Sarah. She was relieved by the revelation, if only slightly disappointed. It had been nice thinking that a man had found her attractive. Not that she would do anything about it. Sarah would never be able to give her heart away to another human being the way she had with Jeffrey. It wasn't that she was incapable of love. She was simply incapable of repeating that kind of abandon. "Hey there!" Krakauer was walking out of the lounge as she went in. "You off?" "Yes," Sarah told him, but the doctor was already down the hall, staring straight ahead, trying to ignore the patients who were calling to him. She went to her locker and spun the dial. She took out her purse and dropped it on the bench behind her. The zipper gaped open. She saw the edge of the letter tucked in between her wallet and her keys. The letter. The explanation. The excuse. The plea for absolution. The shifting of blame. What could the woman who had single-handedly brought about Jeffrey's death possibly have to say? Sarah took out the envelope. She rubbed it between her fingers. There was no one else in the lounge. She was alone with her thoughts. Alone with the diatribe. The ramblings. The juvenile justifications. What could be said? Lena Adams had worked for Jeffrey. She was one of his detectives on the Grant County Police Force. He had covered for Lena, bailed her out of trouble, and fixed her mistakes for over 10 years. In return, she had put his life in jeopardy, gotten him mixed up with the kind of men who killed for sport. Lena had not planted that bomb, or even known about it. There was no court of law that would condemn her for her actions, but Sarah knew to the core of her being, that Lena was responsible for Jeffrey's death. It was Lena who had gotten him involved with those bloodless mercenaries. It was Lena who had put Jeffrey in the way of the men who murdered him. As usual, Jeffrey had been protecting Lena, and it had gotten him killed. And for that, Lena was as guilty as the man who had planted the bomb. Even guiltier as far as Sarah was concerned, because Sarah knew that Lena's conscience was eased by now. She knew that there were no charges that could be brought, no punishment to bring down on her head. Lena would not be fingerprinted or humiliated as they photographed and strip-searched her. She would not be put into solitary confinement because the inmates wanted to kill the cop who'd just been sentenced to prison. She would not feel the needle in her arm. She would not look out into the viewing area of the death chamber at the state penitentiary and see Sarah sitting there, waiting for Lena Adams to finally die for her crimes. She had gotten away with cold-blooded murder, and she would never be punished for it. Sarah tore off the corner of the envelope and slipped her thumb along the edge, breaking the seal. The letter was on yellow legal paper, one-sided, each of the 3 pages numbered. The ink was blue, probably from a ballpoint pen. Jeffrey had favored yellow legal pads. Most cops do. They keep stacks of them on hand, and they always produce a fresh one when a suspect is ready to write a confession. They slide the tablet across the table, uncap a fresh new pen, and watch the words flow from pen to paper, the confessor turning from suspect to criminal. Juries like confessions written on yellow legal paper. It's something familiar to them, less formal than a typed statement, though there was always a typed statement to back it up. Sarah wondered if Somewhere there was a transcription of the printed capital letters that crossed the pages she now held in her hands. Because as sure as Sarah was standing in the doctor's lounge at Grady Hospital, this was a confession. Would it make a difference, though? Would Lena's words change anything? Would they bring back Jeffrey? Would they give Sarah back her old life, the life where she belonged? After the last 3.5 years, Sarah knew better. Nothing would bring that back. Not pleading, or pills, or punishments. No list would ever capture a moment. No memory would ever recreate that state of bliss. There would only be the emptiness, the gaping hole in Sarah's life that had once been filled by the only man in the world she could ever possibly love. In short, no matter what Lena had to say, it would never bring Sarah any peace. Maybe knowing this made it easier. Sarah sat down on the bench behind her and read the letter anyway. This is Kathleen Early. We hope you've enjoyed this unabridged production of Undone, a novel by Karin Slaughter. Presented by HarperCollins and Harper Audio. This program was produced by AnAn Audio Services. The director was Vanessa Melendez. Executive producer, Suzanne Franco-Mitchell. Text copyright 2009 by Karin Slaughter Publishing, LLC. Production copyright 2018 by HarperCollins Publishers. All rights reserved. Thank you for listening.